This is Litlington in Cambridgeshire. On the face of it, it's a quintessential English village. You see the medieval church over there, and right behind the camera, over here, there's the post office and village store, and round this corner here, the village pub. I think I know a few people who'll be interested in that. So far, so what? Well, there's more to this place than meets the eye. Because the people of Litlington believe their village may hide one of the best-kept Roman secrets in Britain. And with good reason. 180 years ago, a local vicar put a trench in this field and decided it was the site of one of the biggest Roman homes in Britain. But not only that, another dig about the same time claimed to have found a beautiful walled Roman cemetery a few hundred yards away, probably part of the same complex. So you've got this massive villa, an elaborate cemetery. This stuff ought to be in the history books. Only problem is, nearly all the records have been lost. I think it's time we spent 3 days putting Roman Litlington back on the map, don't you? The area of Cambridgeshire we'll be digging over the next 3 days is a bit of a Roman puzzle. There's been very little modern archaeological investigation here. In fact, almost all we know is based on digs carried out over 100 years ago. But if we're to believe those century-old endeavours, then the jewels in the crown have to be the cemetery and villa recorded at Litlington on this 1836 plan.
It's got this amazing, tantalising plan of the Roman villa here, and we don't know where this chap was getting his information from. We have no record, apart from this, of any previous excavations at the villa. What we do know from this is that people thought that the villa was of absolutely massive size. I mean, this is nearly 200 metres across.
Which, if you look in the paddock here, 200 metres, well, in any one direction, could virtually fill up the entire paddock. And, of course, we don't actually know that we're in this paddock entirely. It could be that they actually run in underneath these houses over here. There's just so much, like Helen says, that we just don't know.
What's your instinct about what we've got here?
I can't even begin to guess at this point in time. I mean, it's clear there's something important here. But this is a palatial building, and we don't have villas like that in this area. I mean, we've got some nice villas, but nothing on this scale.
Well, the first thing we need to do is actually find out just how accurate this plan is. Because if it's correct, then we could be looking at one of the biggest villas ever discovered in Britain. But even if the gentlemen amateurs of the 19th century hadn't reported Litlington, I'm sure we'd have ended up here one day.
Lovely. That is a very nice example of a Roman hairpin.
Because the locals have been finding loads of Roman stuff all over the village for decades.
So that's huge Roman tile. I mean, look at it. That's got to be part of a Roman floor. Got to be.
Including a lot of stuff in this small copse to the south of our main field.
We found these lying on the surface, so we started to pick them up and ended up with a whole bag full. Wow.
We've also got here a piece of Roman hypercourse tile, so that's central heating.
And mosaic and heating tiles suggest a Roman bathhouse.
Secret garden, this is absolutely crazy.
Which is just the sort of thing you'd expect to find attached to a grand Roman villa.
I'm glad you're showing us a way in.
Yeah,
Can you show us a way out again as well?
So while we wait for a geophys target in the main field, we're going to have a quick rummage in the copse to see how it fits into our Roman story.
Oh, you're not using saws, Phil. You're going straight for just bulldozing it out of the way.
This is...
And that means we need to do a spot of light deforestation.
That's better, isn't it?
Where do you want to put it, though?
I don't...
So with finds from around the village and evidence of something quite substantial in this copse, it would seem that whatever was here covered a large area.
There's another one.
Oh,
Tessera.
Tessera, Hannah.
Yeah.
There's another one here. It's obviously part of a Roman pavement. I mean, whether it's in situ or whether it's just been dumped in here, there's the sort of million-dollar question.
And a villa is the sort of archaeological target that should positively scream its presence on the geophys results.
Oh boy. Well, we're not seeing a villa in that data. We're not seeing anything like the responses that we should be getting.
Oh dear. Well, that's not the sort of response I was expecting. But there's a chance we've asked him to geophys the wrong part of the field. Because, as Stuart and Helen are discovering, the antiquarian map may not be as reliable as we first hoped.
There are bits of this map which actually look fine in relation to the later mapping, and there are bits which look completely wrong. It's like a half-right map is this at the moment. But when you get further south here towards this road junction, this is where it starts to go a bit wayward, because that's quite some distance from the modern south end of the village.
This map is from just one of many digs carried out here by antiquarians, vicars, doctors and the like, who were the predecessors of today's archaeologists. But although their intentions were honourable, their record-keeping could be somewhat poor.
Now, in 1913, the Cambridge Antiquarian Society comes to Litlington to visit Mr McLaren at Manor Farm because he's found a bit of a villa, and they view the excavations and they have tea in the garden. It all sounds lovely.
Do we have the report?
Not yet, and in fact I think we may never find one because they don't seem to have been terribly impressed at what they found. They said although there was an extensive building, there were only foundations left and finds were only really pottery.
It seems crazy to me that we've got all these late 19th, early 20th century references to this site, but really no tangible written evidence. What are we going to do?
Well, I think we've just got to keep digging through all the references and see if there's something buried somewhere in a library we can come up with. Although 1914 is not a great time to be embarking on post-excavation analyses, and I think that report may never come to light.
So we still haven't got a target for our first trench in the main field.
Phil, Raksha, what have you got down in the woods?
But our scratching around in the copse has just produced some lovely Roman archaeology.
There's just enough here to indicate that we do have a floor and that's where they come from.
Oh, good grief.
This really is a cracking little discovery, although it's much too early to say what kind of building this stretch of paving belongs to. In the meantime, there's still the small matter of the main field, where, according to the antiquarian map, there should be a massive, positively palatial villa.
We've done a really big chunk, both magnetically, all over this field and in the paddock on that side, and magnetically we're seeing old ditches that are visible on the tithe map.
Can you see anything else there that might be a Roman villa?
Nothing. If there was a major villa where we've surveyed, I'm sure we'd see it.
So what are we going to do, just keep geophysing the rest of the field?
Yeah, I think we keep looking.
This is getting so frustrating. Normally, by now, we've put in at least one trench, but it's lunchtime day one, and all we've done is fertled around in that copse. We can't start digging because we haven't got any clear targets. Help. This is Litlington in Cambridgeshire, and this morning in this field I was offered not just a Roman villa, but a palatial Roman villa, 300 foot by 500 foot. And the big news is we can't find it. See that geophys? There's nothing there at all except these odd trackway things. We can't even put in a trench because we haven't got any targets. Where's my villa?
Look, we're doing pretty well. We've got stuff over there in the copse. We've got a tessellated pavement there. But I will admit, we haven't so far got a massive villa in this part of the field.
So what do we do?
We're not going to give up. Instead of going for the digital method, though, we're going to try the analogue method and actually trust to the maps and see what they come up with.
What does he mean by the analogue method?
I don't know, but he's looking at me when he said it. Okay. At the moment, the only real evidence we've got that ever was a villa in this field is this one plan that was made in the early 19th century showing what looks like a courtyard villa. So what we're looking at, if we accept this as it is, and we don't know how reliable it is, that there is a rectangular villa-type structure extending down towards that copse, under those houses up there and back up, if we take that as gospel. And it's the only thing we've got at the moment which actually says there might be a villa in this field.
So our first trench in this massive field goes in on the basis of a single 170-year-old map. It's hardly the most scientifically robust target we've ever had, but then again...
Hold them in. Hey! Bit of Roman roof tile. I think that's a bit of...
After the frustration of this morning, it's good to know that we seem to be in the right place, in spite of a complete lack of geophys evidence.
Look at this underneath.
Back in the copse, our earlier discovery of a Roman floor means that this is also now the location of a full-on excavation.
Oh!
Oh.
Ah, no, look at that.
That's the edge.
I mean, look at the alignment. The alignment of that wall is exactly the same alignment as our pavement here.
So we're going to put in a couple of trenches in the copse to see if there is potentially a bathhouse buried under all this shrubbery.
There is actually a sort of linear comes through on the geophysics at a funny angle there, Ian.
While for good luck, Stuart's putting in a second trench in the main field to see if Phil's walls and pavement continue towards the rest of the villa.
Ian? Ian? Hang on. Tesserae number 1.
In the space of a couple of hours, we've gone from twiddling our thumbs to being stretched to the limit.
How about that? That's Roman floor. That looks like a mosaic floor. Okay.
But it seems to be worth it,
Huge amount of it left.
even if it's just to justify to the landowners why we're trashing their copse.
We've got a doorway.
A door?
Yeah.
Really?
Check it out.
Oh, isn't that fantastic?
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's even inventive, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So there we go, a Roman doorway. Absolutely brilliant.
The evidence we're finding in here certainly suggests we may be coming down onto something posh enough to belong to a high-status Roman villa.
Ooh, that's painted wall plaster. It's got blue and green on as well. That's absolutely fantastic.
Or maybe I spoke too soon. Just after lunch, we put a trench in over here, even though we couldn't see anything in the geophys, because Stuart had worked out that this, on the 19th century drawing, is where the villa should be. So we thought, well, we'd dig it and see if the antiquarians were right. Although, Matt, I can't quite see a villa there.
That's because there isn't a villa in there. In fact, there's not even the remnants of a villa anywhere nearby here.
So what's this recess here?
Well, what we've got here is what the geophysics showed, which was a great big linear coming all the way through, back up there. There's a parallel one just beyond the edge of the trench there, and we've also got another ditch coming straight across it that way.
Just a minute. Isn't that Roman tile?
That is Roman tile, and we've got a couple of bits of Roman pottery.
So?
But it doesn't tell us there was a villa here. I mean, look at it. It's broken, it's rounded. It could have been dragged from a very long way away by the plough. It could have come from anywhere. It tells us there's a Roman building in the vicinity. It doesn't tell us anything about what's going on in this trench.
The only recognisable archaeology in this trench is a medieval trackway. There's absolutely no trace of anything structural slap bang in the middle of where we expected to find our record-breaking villa. Frankly, this is a bit of a disaster. It may only be the afternoon of day 1, but I feel I need to have some serious words with our site director. I'm going to ask Ben the question that no one else seems to have the bottle to ask you. Suppose there isn't a villa here at all?
I think we've definitely got a villa. I mean, you don't get that amount of building material, you don't get the tessellated pavement, the wall plaster, all these finds without there being a villa here. There must be a villa here.
What about the one tangible piece of evidence we've got, the copse? What's going on there?
Clearly an important building, or part of a building. I mean, have a look at this. I mean, we could be talking about a bathhouse, for example, typically a bit peripheral or you know, towards the edge of the area because of the fire risk. Could it be that it's one of the reception rooms? Nice mosaic in there. Could it be even one of the main living spaces? We haven't got quite enough to go on. It might then acquire...
Well, Ben's big, shiny, graphic imaginings are all well and good. But they're quite a leap from the reality of the site that so far produced quite a lot of nothing. although I will admit the structure in the copse has cleaned up pretty well. Oh, Ben, this is it. This is Roman archaeology. We can sleep tonight after all.
Yes, you didn't believe me quite, did you? But here we are. Tessellated pavement, maybe the interior of a room. We've even got what looks like a doorway there, look, worn by people's tread to and fro. And a huge, substantial wall, chalk clunch wall running through here. So, no question about it, we've got a big building here.
And where do you think it goes?
Well, yeah, where does it go? We've got a bit of a problem heading in that direction because, of course, Matt's Trench doesn't have anything Roman in it, it appears. We also have to think about how far east does this building go. So what we plan to do tomorrow is to extend, do some test pitting and chart how big this building is in that direction.
By the east, you mean into people's gardens?
Yeah, I'm afraid so, yeah.
We like that, don't we? Beginning of day 2 here in the little Cambridgeshire village of Litlington, and we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. Yesterday we were trawling through 8 acres of that field looking for a lost Roman villa, which we couldn't find. So today we're going to be digging there and here and there. Off you go, team. These 3 test pits are just the beginning of a concerted effort to understand what was going on in Roman Litlington. As the only thing we've really established so far is that the gigantic villa recorded in this 1836 plan isn't in this field. But we're pretty sure there's a substantial Roman building nearby because of the evidence Phil's uncovered in the neighbouring copse.
Something that big, that is a big foundation, isn't
Absolutely.
it? That's a big supporting wall.
Absolutely.
So it makes sense
Although
in the
we
corner of
originally
the building.
suspected this may be a bathhouse, we're now thinking it's a suite of posh rooms.
We've placed our trench on the vital intersection of 2 ranges of one building. We've got, where that tessellated pavement is with the brush on, is a corridor running through there with rooms leading off from there. And you would come down the corridor, you would turn a corner into this wing, and you could go down this corridor, and you would then lead off into rooms where Faye is.
So, theoretically, I could walk down this corridor here, open the door, and there I am in Faye's posh room.
Absolutely, and they really are posh too, because she's got painted wall plaster that show that they are really the top range rooms of the building.
So far, Phil's corner and Faye's plastered wall are the only reliable Roman archaeology we've uncovered. It may not be a lot, but guess what? It's enough for Stuart and Henry to come up with a theory.
They've now got walls in Phil's and Faye's trenches, so I've surveyed those in. Now I have extrapolated those a little bit. Looks to me like they're part of the same plan.
They suspect the antiquarians who made this plan did see a massive villa, they just happened to draw it in the wrong place.
The alignment of that, actually, that's the copse you've got in there, and the alignment of the things you've got there are the same.
Yeah.
They're going on that same axis. So whether these are related to different building to that, or whether that's a misunderstanding of the antiquarians and really that building was down there, it's all a bit up in the air at the moment.
If Stuart's right and the villa is further south, that would explain why bits of tiled floor were found under these barns 20 years ago. Then again, if the antiquarians got the position of the villa wrong, they may also have got its size wrong. And that's why the back garden test pits are so important.
Nothing Roman at all.
No. So how much further before you give up and say, well, that's it?
From this level that I'm on now, I would say another foot maybe or so.
Yeah, then you give up. Right.
Then I'd give up, yeah.
Because if we dig enough holes, we should find the true size and location of the building that's produced so much Roman archaeology over the years.
So do you think that's a bit of wall you found there, then?
Well, I think we're definitely down to some kind of Roman layer.
It's vital we uncover as much information as we can, because the antiquarians left virtually no written records about their digs. And yet, surprisingly, many of their finds have survived.
You come up here and come and see the dead Roman. You not move back, let the other children come forward and come see the dead Roman and goodbye.
And thanks to the Antiquities Museum in Cambridge, many of them have been given a day trip back to where they were found.
But I bet you'd quite like to drink wine out of something like this. That's a little
Young, aren't they?
wine. No, I don't know.
Outrageous drink.
No, you have
Outrageous.
water in it as well. I'm sure they'd have started off early. So that's a wine drinking cup.
Have you ever seen anybody grinding up food in the kitchen? Yeah, that's for grinding food. So that was once a Roman lady's bowl in the kitchen. She had to stand there and grind her food up. Maybe it broke one day and she chucked it out.
This collection of pottery is recorded as coming from the Villa and Grand Roman Cemetery at Litlington. And it would appear from these finds that the history of the cemetery, known locally as Heaven's Walls, and the villa are intimately linked. So we're going to try and find the location of Heaven's Walls. And unfortunately, that means using the map that's already caused us all sorts of trouble.
The plan also shows a cemetery area. Lots of really juicy cemetery finds. There were pots, there were objects, all sort of things, even suggestions that something might here be a tomb. So I would suggest that we start at the edge of those back gardens there and do a swathe of geophysics, something like that, between the stubble field and into the ploughed field.
That looks about 3 days' work on its own.
So Geophys trudge off to another massive field to look for another missing antiquarian site. I'm getting a feeling of déjà vu here.
This is where Raksha's doing. Hiya. Hello. Hello. How's it going? Enjoying my tea break.
I can see you're really snowed under, aren't you?
Back up on the main site, our first test pits have had mixed results. We've basically found nothing of note in 2 of the gardens, but Rakshas's trench has produced something.
So we've got this, which looks kind of convincing. Very abraded bit of tessera and plaster.
This mix of scrappy bits of plaster and chalk suggests demolition of a nearby Roman building. If I was feeling optimistic, I would say that we're slowly closing in on our target. And that can mean only one thing. Raksha and our diggers moving into new gardens to continue the search for the villa.
Should we do it together? No. No? OK.
Our villa is over there where those houses are. In fact, quite a lot of it's probably under those houses. But somewhere in this field, we think there might be a rare walled Roman cemetery which would be associated with the villa, except nobody really knows precisely where it is, do they?
Well, I think we do now.
Oh, there was triumph in that tone. Why?
Well, we've done the magnetic survey, and look, Ben's got the results here. This ditch here turns through a right angle. And I just wonder whether that could be the boundary of the cemetery.
Where would you want to put in a trench?
Well, look at the results in detail. This is the ditch I'm talking about, and I'd like to put a trench across that ditch and taking in one of the anomalies inside to see whether we've got a sort of pit or maybe even a grave cut.
So although we're really stretched up at the villa, we're putting in a trench to establish whether or not this is indeed the location of the Heaven's Walls cemetery.
Just one little second. It's tiny, but it does look like a little beady rim there, and that could easily be a little Roman pot.
Job done.
I think John's self-confidence is a little misplaced. We've still got a long way to go to match the quality of the antiquarian finds from the cemetery, because none of them were damaged by later industrial ploughing.
Here we've got a very early piece of Samian ware, made in Gaul. It's right from the early part of the Roman occupation. Very unusual to find that complete, but I can see that being used as the lid to a cremation urn, which they very often were. These are probably grave goods too, for libations or food for a grave. Then we've got this Samian cup, which is probably a grave good holding wine or liquid or something for the deceased.
They really are in very good condition, those vessels, aren't they?
They're exceptionally good, and just imagine if we'd been able to excavate this site ourselves 200 years ago. This is probably the sort of material we'd have found.
Unfortunately, we can only dream of making such discoveries. But back in the copse, there's been a breakthrough, and Phil now thinks he is digging a bathhouse.
But now we got down here, we've got this concrete type block in here. Now this is, well, I'm sure it's in situ. It's not a piece of loose debris. I'm wondering, because it's in a hole, whether I'm in one of the pools of a bathhouse.
Well, let me hop in here. So I mean, you're close to the sort of, a mosaic floor behind you, which is, what you'd expect near to that sort of structure within a villa. And you've got, it's definitely sort of, say brick stroke tile.
So what you're trying to say is, I think you are right, Phil. I think you do have a bathhouse.
I might be right, absolutely. Let's hope so.
Even if this is a bathhouse, it would still suggest that there's a fairly posh home or villa nearby. So it would look like our discoveries are tying up quite nicely with the fancy Roman pottery uncovered almost 200 years ago. But this being Time Team, there's always somebody around to throw a spanner in the archaeological works. Guy, you've got severe doubts about whether all of the finds from the cemetery actually are from the cemetery.
Yeah, I've got to admit I have. I mean, let's just paint that picture. Jump back 200 years' time and you've got the Reverend so-and-so round in Litlington, and he's known as the local antiquarian or whatever, and various people have found bits around here and they say, "Oh, Mr. Reverend, so I found this in my back garden in my field. You'd probably enjoy having this in your collection." And he said, "Oh, thank you very much." And it all goes into a box and he sticks it in his glass cabinet and shows it off to his friends and everything else. You jump on about 50 or 60 years and the Reverend so-and-so's popped his clogs, and of course his collection gets boxed up and some well-meaning person sends it off to Cambridge Museum with a label in it or something like that. Jump on 100 years to Mr. Tony Robinson and Time Team, and these finds are looked at, by which time, of course, it's all got jumbled up, and probably the case is that some of these pots come from here, but probably a lot of them come from other finds around here. They're all over the place in date terms, so, who knows?
So we could be making assumptions about this place on the back of the finds, and actually we're making totally wrong assumptions.
Yeah, we're just forgetting about the fact that a huge amount of things and events and people have been involved in the last 180 years. Everything from all the building work around here to bits of paper blowing across in cabinets, and therefore things getting mislabelled, jumbled up and mixed up.
So maybe antiquarian enthusiasm has clouded our knowledge of this site.
Oh, Governor, I found this pot in my back garden. Why don't you have that in your collection?
And his wife says, "Oh, I've got one too."
That's right. Yeah.
And even without the dodgy accents, we shouldn't rely too much on that antiquarian evidence.
The pit is there.
Yeah.
Then we've got
Much better to rely on the evidence we've uncovered in the trenches. Or the apparent lack of evidence in the case of the cemetery.
could this be where they're just digging for gravel?
Yeah, and this being the backfill, the stuff that they didn't want.
Possibly.
It could be.
We now have archaeologists all over Litlington, turning the village upside down. But we still haven't found any other major Roman structure outside of the copse.
Right down the bottom here, we've got part of one of the baths that they would have got into.
Which we're now fairly sure is indeed a bathhouse.
Where I'm standing now would have been quite a big open room with certainly a pool in here.
When you say baths, Phil, you don't mean baths like we have, do you?
I don't mean a 6-foot bath with taps at the end, no. The Romans had very, very special ways of having baths. They had at least 3 rooms, and it was a real ritual.
They all used to bath together, and often they didn't get cleaned out all that much, and they would shave in the bath and all the hairs would be floating on the surface, and there'd be all manky soap on the surface as well, and then eventually they'd have to get some poor slave would come in and scrape all this stuff off.
It's a bit like my bath at home, actually. Nobody ever told me that you had to empty it.
A little bit too much information there.
We've got one of 1887, so that sort of gives us a time stamp of what was on the map at that time. So if we use those...
But although we only have the bathhouse at the minute, Stuart thinks he's getting closer to finding the rest of the villa.
Roman villa, so they put a cross where they think it is, and they've also put another cross here saying Roman pavement hypercourse found in AD 1881, quite specific.
Yeah.
If you take the positions of those and transfer them to the modern map, which I've done, the site of the villa actually falls That cross falls in the back garden just adjacent to the copse there. And the other one, the hypercaust, it falls just there, which is in the back garden of number 2 Anvil Avenue. So you can see they're both very close to each other and very close to the copse where we're finding material too.
And would you believe it, he may actually be right. Over there are the 3 houses with the back gardens into which we put the test pits this morning, and unfortunately we drew a blank. But in this back garden there is a trench which, if you are interested in archaeology, you just love to have in your garden. John, is that what I think it is?
Yes, tessellated floor.
Does it look like the one in Phil's trench?
Yes, it's just like the one in Phil's trench, really. It's the sort of coarse tesserae you see in these Roman buildings, so...
How far away do you reckon his trench is?
Well, we're probably a good 30 to 40 metres away from Phil, where he is now.
So it's not the same building?
Well, it could be the same building, could well be. It just means bigger building.
This is a small but major breakthrough. So we're now going to extend this trench. But not half as much as we're going to extend our investigation in the copse.
Oh, get him in.
And that means weeding on an industrial scale. We've now got just 1 day to get to the bottom of Roman Litlington.
You want to come and have a look and see what we've done to your wood?
What have you done to our...
Well, we've just given it a bit of daylight, you see. You've got to put a bit of daylight in here.
Let's just hope the locals are still talking to us by this time tomorrow. Beginning of day 3 here on this baffling site at Litlington in Cambridgeshire, where we're looking for a Roman villa, which we can't find, and a Roman cemetery, which we can't find either. And the one tangible piece of archaeology we've got seems to have changed character 3 times over the last 36 hours. And it's not that I want to add any more tension to the mix, it's just that in 7 hours' time, I've got to explain the whole site to the entire village. And frankly, at the moment, I wouldn't even know where to start. Which is why we're throwing everything we have at this site, with countless trenches in back gardens and fields all around the village. But at the moment, the only thing we're really sure about is the bathhouse we've uncovered in the piece of scorched earth that used to be a copse.
I'll say, Master Philip, this looks like a bit of an ex-copse this morning.
I want your opinion. Come on in here a minute.
My opinions are free.
No, well, that's why I want your opinion, because you don't charge as much as anybody else. Now, look, through here, you've got more of this almost fired clay. We've been calling that the bath. It's in a hypercaust, is it? This split arrangement.
Where's the Roman floor level?
The Roman floor level's there. We've got the mosaics on it. And
So it's a couple of feet higher than this?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can see where the floor is.
So that might be the original floor surface on a hypercaust that's fallen through. Could that be?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
At the moment, Phil suspects that at some point, the original floor of this building, which may or may not have been a plunge pool, had a hypercaust, a heated floor system built on top of it. So far, so good.
There obviously has got to be a hypercaust. Logically, there's got to be a hypercaust in here somewhere.
Only if it is a bathhouse. And we don't absolutely know that for certain, do we?
Oh, dear.
It might be.
But Tony's going to love this when we change our opinions yet again. He knew we would.
I think for his own personal sanity and mine, Phil may have to stop asking our Romanists for their opinions. And in the absence of any conclusive decision, he's going to just keep on digging.
Where do you find these tesserae then?
We just found them in this corner here, in this corner. Yes.
We've also continued to put test pits in gardens that produced Roman finds.
Is this mostly Roman that's coming up, would you say?
It looks like there's another piece of tesserae.
Oh, yes, brilliant.
Right there.
Oh, fantastic.
And this game of archaeological battleships is beginning to give us a rough idea of how big an area a Roman building could have covered here.
The thing is, if they saw such a massive villa in that area, Why can't we find it?
And it doesn't really tie up with the grand plan the antiquarians drew.
It makes you wonder if they found a massive villa, or they found a bit of Roman stuff here, and a bit of Roman stuff there, and a bit of Roman stuff there, and started to make a villa out of not very much.
Yeah, there's still Roman, bits of Roman stuff coming out of there. I just had a piece of tile out of it.
And if dealing with one antiquarian site wasn't enough, there's the small matter of the walled cemetery that we suspect may be associated with our Roman building. Jackie, can I come in?
Yeah, sure, come down the steps.
What is it you've got?
Well, we know that in this field, this cemetery was discovered in about 1820 by gravel quarry diggers. And they found the cemetery, the antiquarians came in, they dug out what they wanted, and they carried on digging gravel out of here for quite some time. And then they would have backfilled everything the holes they'd left behind. And I was getting really despondent yesterday because we weren't finding any bits of material at all. And fantastically this morning, at about this level here, I turned up a whole load of human bone.
Oh, fantastic.
We've got bits of femur and bits of tibia from the leg bones. And even better, we had a piece of pottery turnip which has been dated at late Iron Age, early Romano-British.
So you're sure they're Roman bones?
Yeah, this is what they left behind of the material from the cemetery that they didn't want to take away.
John, looks like you were right. There's a cemetery here after all.
Yeah, we knew it was here. It had to be on the basis of our results.
Don't crow.
No. What we've done this morning is expand our survey back in this field. Now, you remember yesterday we had this ditch that turned through a right angle. Now you can see it extending, and it's starting to form a really big enclosure. You can actually see some detail. Now, look at that point there. Have we got a little square enclosure with a pit inside and a circular wall beyond? Are we looking at the mausoleum?
So we're going to put it in another trench?
We've got to.
So we're putting in one final trench over John's potential mausoleum, as it would be fantastic to establish that at least one Roman tomb has survived the 18th century gravel quarrying.
This looks pretty solid. Here's the wall. That's solid, it's coming down. Solid, solid. I think that might be the base of something.
So it would seem that we may have at last uncovered some solid evidence of the Roman cemetery. And with only a few hours to go, it looks like we may have finally got a handle on this blasted villa.
Oh, you got your floor surface here.
Really?
Yeah. Look in that corner. See how much more solid that is?
Oh, yeah. It looks like Ben's test pit strategy is at last paying off. So, thanks to a lot of hard graft, determination and countless cups of tea, we're finally beginning to work out how much of Litlington is built on top of the villa.
Thank heavens I've found you, Raksha. I feel like a door-to-door salesman going around these gardens. What have you got then?
Oh, Stu, I've persevered for 2 days now. This is the third garden I've been in.
Yeah.
This is the third test pit I've done. And I've actually come up with the goods.
Oh, wow. What have you got?
I found this amazing robbed-out wall,
right.
which is exactly what we were looking for.
And this is definitely in situ, and you're confident it's a Roman period wall?
Yes, we've had lots and lots of Roman finds coming out of here.
That is so nice, because this is your test pit in here.
Yeah.
The blue dots and walls, we've actually got good Roman buildings still sitting in their original position in the ground. The orange zones are where we've got spreads of demolition rubble showing there are walls and things nearby. Now that actually starts to make sense. If you take a corridor villa with two wings, and this is one that's not that far from here really, and if you put it over here, it fits quite nicely with stuff in situ there, stuff in situ here, corridor going across that way, oriented to the south, which is exactly what you would expect. I think you deserve an ice cream for your perseverance, you know.
So with more pieces of the jigsaw falling into place, we can begin to put some of Litlington back together again.
That's going to go... Oh, is that going to carry on? Yes, it is, look.
Although it may take some bits longer to recover.
Bless them, when they dug it in the 20th century, the early 20th century, they just smashed their way through it.
Jackie?
Hello?
Can you come over here for a sec?
Back down at the cemetery, it now looks like the antiquarians and gravellers didn't completely destroy the Roman burial ground.
Oh, what timing.
Well, even I can tell that's a human skull there.
Yeah.
There was also, in there...
Ah.
That.
Yes, that looks awfully like a coffin nail, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah. This is intact, in situ. It's not redeposited. This is where the guy went in. We've got somebody laid on their left side, facing that direction.
With Matt's trench confirming the presence of the mausoleum shown in John's geophys, it's probably safe to suggest at least 1 or 2 other graves may also survive beneath this field. I think we can safely call that a result.
Have you got any ideas what it could be?
One time in my life when I need a Romanist, and there's never one here.
But even at this late stage, the Romanists are continuing to frustrate Phil's quest for a final decision on what's in the copse.
What is going on?
Well, I don't know. That's why you're here to tell me.
Right, OK. Well, knowing what's happening in a bathhouse that hasn't been dug by someone, and one that's obviously been dug into, and elements removed, elements explored, taken away, that's 2 different things, really, isn't it?
I mean, it is a bit of a blow to the stomach, though. I mean, we've shifted a lot of muck today, and we've worked hard. And at the end of the day, to turn round after all that graft and say we haven't got the foggiest idea, that's a bitter pill to swallow.
I don't think we're saying we haven't got the foggiest idea.
Well, that's what you were saying to me, isn't it? What is it?
I'm saying
then?
it in
what is it
more
then?
words.
What is it then?
The fact is, no one knew what was here until 3 days ago. No one knew, and no one had made a proper record
And now
of it.
you're saying we still don't know.
No, we've made a proper document. No, I'm not saying that. We've pinned down a range of possibilities.
Ah!
And that is eminently better than having not the foggiest idea. We've got thick deposits of plaster, and it looks like they've made a concerted effort to make some of these rooms perhaps watertight, or at least to consolidate them.
So is this a bathhouse?
Yes.
Well, there we go then. I'm happy with that.
So, possibly with a gun to his head, Ben's finally decided that this is a bathhouse.
So has this come from more than one room, or from one room, or can't you say?
It looks to me like it's probably come from one room.
And as the plaster we've uncovered in Stephen and Hilary's copse suggests, it was once a rather plush suite of rooms.
Roman walls are incredibly lurid by our standards. They're very deep, heavy, hard colours that I think we would find very oppressive. You'd walk in there and be really quite sort of crushed. You'd probably feel really claustrophobic in a Roman room. But we do know that the Romans painted these very distinct zones on the walls. It tends to have a kind of a bottom third, and then above that a series of vertical panels, in which would normally have been some sort of much more decorative picture, perhaps a mythological scene or maybe a goddess. And had the antiquarians found any bits of wall plaster that had such a figure on it, they would undoubtedly have taken it away.
This finely decorated bathhouse would have been a focus for any villa. And thanks to the results from the test pits and the bits of radar John could get from the back gardens, we think that the villa would have sat roughly in the area now occupied by these houses. But truthfully, that's about it. We can't really say what the villa looked like or what its relationship is to the cemetery we've discovered. And yet most of us feel we've still learned more about Roman Litlington in 3 days than all the previous antiquarian excavations.
We've got now a fantastic record. For the first time, where these walls actually are. For the first time, not just a rumour of a bathhouse and a couple of lines in a scrappy document. We've actually pinned down where the walls are, on what alignment they are.
Nevertheless, goose, wild and chase are words which spring to my mind, although not necessarily in that order.
I will admit there have been certain difficulties with pinning this one down. But that's partly the fault of following this antiquarian stuff. But importantly, we've been trying to tread in their steps. Just what is it that they saw? And I think we're now getting to grips with that. We're starting to see it properly as they saw it. They left no documents.
Well, almost everyone thinks we've done better.
I just can't get over this. We're all so smug and self-satisfied. There's nothing worse than a gang of modern-day self-righteous archaeologists banging on about the Beelzebubs sent down from Hades who dug up and destroyed these sites a couple of hundred years ago. Along we come, these saints, the sun glazing on us from Apollo. We're so wonderful and perfect. What's going to happen in a couple of hundred years' time is that people are going to be looking at the kind of records we're churning out. GPS with what satellite? What, the one that burnt up in the atmosphere 150 years ago that we can no longer possibly calibrate? Oh, it's all recorded on this nice little bit of plastic. Oh, well, we haven't had a drive for one of those for the last 2 centuries. At least with the antiquarians, you can read the words they wrote.
What, and you don't think we're going to generate a documentary record that's more impressive than this? I'm sorry, that's
not in 200 years' time.
That shows a complete lack of faith. We
yes,
have got...
Much as I'd love to listen to this mature discussion for the next few hours,
We could at all, because we could have just had that and a blazing 3-dimensional multicoloured hologram.
I've got an appointment with a few of the locals. Or maybe more than a few, who are now keen to know what we've done with Litlington's villa.
It is the whole village, isn't it? I said the whole village. I thought they were joking.
Welcome, welcome. Can you see the robust Roman walls, which... You can't see them? No. So you may think that the great villa of Litlington doesn't exist. But we'd like to show you something else. Come over this way. It's been a frustrating and at times an infuriating 3 days here, but at least the people of Litlington now know what was going on here almost 2,000 years ago.
We do know that in parts of this building there were some really expensive floors. We found not...
And in spite of some people's misgivings, I have to say this site proves the benefits of digging into the past. You do have a villa, we believe it's under there, and you have a bathhouse which hopefully generations of children will be able to visit and learn more about the Romans from. So thanks ever so much for coming, and we had a good time. I hope you did too. Thank you. In 43 AD, the Romans invaded Britain, along with 40,000 men and a load of elephants, all packed into 1,000 ships. They landed down the road at Richborough here in Kent, but immediately after that, no one's really sure what happened, mainly because no Roman forts have ever been found here in southeast England. That is, maybe until now, because archaeologist Paul Wilkinson has got a theory that this hilltop at Sindale may be the site of the first Roman fort ever built in Britain. He's invited Time Team to use their expertise and experience to test his theory, and we're going to need every minute of our 3 days to do it. To me, this looks like the perfect place to build a fort. You've got a great vantage point all the way around Kent. Perfect place for your sentries to be, but what do I know? The person that we really need to talk to is Paul. Paul, why do you think there's a fort here?
Well, because I've dug a trench through here, and underneath the turf we've got a very, very nice Roman ditch. And right at the bottom of that ditch was, in fact, Claudian pottery.
This is the first trench that you've dug?
Exactly where you're standing now.
Well, graphics have done me the kind of map that I'd understand here.
Yes, we're just stood on this trench here, and behind us is the other trench we dug, and by joining up the profiles of those, we could actually see exactly where the Roman ditch ran, and we did exactly the same thing on the east side.
Yeah, but 2 ditches doesn't make a fort, does it? Why are you so convinced that there might have been a fort here?
Location. You know, 43 AD, the Roman army landed at Richborough, marched along the North Kent coast, and it's exactly a day's march to Sindale, where we're standing now. And the Roman fleet would have used the best anchorage along the coast, which in fact is just downhill from here.
So this could be the place that they very first camped after they arrived in Britain.
This is the first overnight stop of that Roman invasion.
It would be fantastic if we found it, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd be a real big story for British archaeologists.
It'd be wonderful.
Over recent years, Paul's been excavating a 3rd to 4th century Roman town nearby, but he's never had the resources to properly test his ideas about this hill, so understandably this is the start of a big 3 days for him. The prospect of finding evidence connected with one of the biggest events in British history has got Victor fired up too. And possibly even carried away. But it's this huddle of Time Team archaeologists who are here to test Paul's theory.
This is the only one that's got actually Claudian pottery from it, isn't this V-shaped one? That looks...
The case for a Roman fort is very much still to be proved, and knowing this lot, they'll take some convincing.
The key thing is how long it took them here, for how much trouble they had, because Dio does tell us there was a lot of guerrilla warfare going on here. The Britons retreating into what he calls swamps and forests. Now, does he mean round here? Does he mean further west? So we don't know whether they got here in a couple of days or whether it took a couple of weeks.
So what do they think of our chances of finding the first Roman fort built in Britain?
No, it's a really exciting idea. I love the idea of finding an early Roman fort, perhaps the first one in that whole Roman conquest, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to pick out. It's a 360-year period of history, and we're talking about a place that might have been occupied for just a few weeks, 1 year, maybe a couple of years at the outside. Really tough.
So already he's starting to rubbish the idea of the first Roman fort.
Yes,
what about a Roman fort, though? Can we find that?
Oh, definitely, because there's some key forensic tests we can apply to the archaeology, if you like, to show whether it's a fort or whether it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, what are the diagnostic traits? First of all, a fort has defences, so it's going to have a rampart around all 4 sides of earth, and outside that, double ditches, 1 ditch, another ditch outside that. In each side, there'll be a gateway, timber gateway built with big, massive timber posts. In each corner, there'll be a tower rising out of the rampart to give views to the outside. And finally, dating is going to be crucial to actually pin down the date of this thing, because we're looking at 10 years in time. So we want pottery, we want the Samian pottery, because this is very, very easily datable. This will help to pin it down even better. Some bits of Roman armour, bits of military equipment. If we get that, then we've cracked it.
Well, they don't want much, do they? But to my surprise, their master plan at the moment is to do nothing. That is until geophys have surveyed the area where Paul found the clearest evidence for a Roman military ditch. The hope is that geophys will not only detect any other Roman ditches, but show us if the 2 bits Paul found join up. This would in fact reveal the shape of the fort. Phil explains to the diggers that there's going to be a bit of a wait, but maybe not, because Stuart has a plan of his own. This one, which is asked graphics to fit to the scale of the modern map of the site. Hello, Stu.
Hi, Tony, can you see where I am under the big tree to your left?
Stuart's interested in this big earthwork bank that's always been thought to be part of some fancy gardens that went with a grand house that was here in the 18th century.
We've actually got a plan here of the 18th century gardens. This is dated 1760, and we've put it to the same scale. And if I overlay it, can you see, that's the road at the top, that's where the house is there. Can you see the symmetry of the gardens that go with the house?
Yeah.
It's nowhere near
it's not,
this
is it?
earthwork here, and it's on a totally different alignment as well.
So even though they were right in saying that this was an old garden, they may have used something that was here before and stuck that on top.
That's what I'm wondering. I think it's such an obvious earthwork and the shape and form of it. We've got to have a look at it. Even if it is a later feature, what's it hiding? Is it hiding any aspect of an earlier landscape?
Phil, come over here, mate.
So, a change of plan.
We're going to get a trench in.
Oh, what?
Stuart's given us a target to dig that's not dependent on geophys.
Good evaluation trench. Down the scarp, out here, 20 metres long.
It's going to be our first test of the site, to cut through the bank to see if there's anything underneath.
It's that first hole, isn't it?
And it's going to be a long trench to see if we can find a continuation of the Roman ditch Paul discovered. So the process of testing the theory that there is a Roman fort here has well and truly begun.
Maybe take a shade more off, but we're getting close,
Oh,
aren't we?
now then. Ah. Now then. That's a bit more like it, isn't it?
That looks to me, that's Roman, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the incident room, the evidence Paul found is under close scrutiny by Roman fort expert Tony Wilmot.
You've got a nice crisp V-shaped profile. You've just got the beginnings of the little square-cut ankle breaker at the bottom. But the eye's really drawn by the fact that somebody's been keen and scored these lines into the section and scored the interpretation into the section.
That's a digger, not a Roman.
Of course. It does slightly draw your eye. And another photograph which goes a bit deeper, you can see that there's a little bit of the ditch which hasn't been scored below it. There's a straight line.
The expert's opinion is that Paul's Roman ditch is even more convincing than the way it was originally interpreted. The only Roman military ditch I'm aware of is this one, as depicted on my idiot's guide, with a steep side where the attacker falls in, and a shallower side, the only way out into the line of fire. But there are 3 different types, and it's the middle one here that fits best with what Paul's found.
So you reckon we've definitely got a military ditch on the west?
Well, it's a very, very, very good candidate. Very good indeed.
Is it one of the double ditches belonging to a Roman fort like this? What we need is a geophys plan of the ditches, and it looks like we won't have to wait too long now.
They're Roman, all right. Now, question is dating. This looks like Belgic grog tempered ware. It could be any time between the late Iron Age and about 100 plus AD.
Just slow down a minute. Belgic grog
tempered, yes.
So what does that mean?
It means the pottery, it's both handmade and wheel turned. It's fired black. It contains the grog. In this context, is not rum. It's pre-fired clay, ground up clay, mixed as a filler with the clay of the pot itself.
You want experts?
Yes.
This is the expert's expert.
Phil's just got a rim. Tony?
Right.
Now look, that looks a bit more diagnostic.
Now I'd like to get this cleaned up. This looks awfully like it's from a biconical beaker in Upchurch ware, which should date from about the year of the conquest through to 100 to 130 AD. Quite a nice diagnostic piece.
So maybe what we've got is a bit of mixed up earlier pottery with some later pottery, which is guess what you expect, because this is the first layer we've got to. So if we keep going, Phil.
Good stuff. And now at last we're going to get to see the much-awaited geophys results. And their first survey contains good, bad and very bad news. The good news is that they've detected these clear features. The bad news is that they're relatively modern, this one being a recent field boundary. We know this because it's in the wrong position to be the ditch Paul found, that's here. The very bad news is that geophys can't see Paul's ditch or any other Roman ditches that might be here.
We need to do a lot more work, but I suspect you're not going to want to wait for us.
Neil, I've heard of anticlimaxes, but we've been waiting for 2/3 of a day to get information which would allow us to find out whether this was the first Roman fort in Britain. And we've got one black blob that he's not all that keen that we should put a trench in anyway.
Sure. I think it's time for plan B, don't you?
It sounds like it. Which might be?
Well, we said there was a series of checklists, didn't we, the things we wanted to find. So why don't we try and attack that? And it seems to me maybe the best place to go is round to the front of the fort, nearest to where Watling Street is.
The M1 of Roman roads, Watling Street, actually cuts across the edge of our site.
It looks as if Watling Street actually goes over this earthwork as a physical relationship, suggesting that the Watling Street is later than this earthwork. What date is the Watling Street from?
We've got pottery from the lowest levels of AD 50-ish.
So that would, if that's correct, that would suggest that this earthwork is earlier than AD 50-ish.
So it's either very early Roman or it's pre-Roman. And if we can nail that down, that's a start, isn't it?
So, test number 2. We're opening up our second trench here where the big earthwork bank turns. We want to know if this could be the corner of a fort and how the earthwork itself relates to Watling Street. Deeply buried archaeology, difficult geology, whatever the reasons for geophys not working, the fact is that without a plan showing where the ditches are, our task has become that much harder. But not impossible, because we have Stuart's expertise to fall back on. His suggestion to position Trench 1 here has revealed a completely new ditch that was hidden by the earthwork bank. Where is it?
Well, I'm standing on it. You can see the yellow natural there and the yellow natural behind us.
All right, you need an expert eye to see it at the moment, but this ditch is about 15 metres away from the one Paul discovered that should show up somewhere about here in Trench 1. Digging was very much part of daily life for a Roman soldier.
I've come to give you a bit of a hand with the digging.
Oh, good lord.
Sorry I'm a bit late.
Roman soldiers had to dig defensive ditches in pretty much full armour in hostile territory.
That can come off as well, can it? Thank the Lord for that.
Phil's enlisting in the Ermine Street Guard for the day to find out what it was like.
This is a funny old tool, isn't it? Is this as near as you can get to a Roman spade?
It's the nearest we've found, as far as I'm aware.
It's definitely a digging tool. I mean, you see, you can dig with it, and in this nice brick earth, it's a good tool to use.
Yeah.
But where you're in problem is if you've got to try and shovel with it like that.
Yeah.
And that's where I would miss a decent shovel. You can't get down there, and it's a poor design. I'd have said it's a poor design.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure Phil would approve, but over in Trench 2, we've got what we think is our first coin, resting on a shovel, ready for Guy to see.
Look, Guy, I think we've got a little coin. It's come out the spoil heap, found by the metal detectorist.
Right, the key thing is the size. That takes us
Ooh,
straight...
but look, you can see, it's quite clear, isn't it? The legend's quite clear.
Let me just see if I can get that up. You're right, it's definitely 4th century now, because I can see that little victory on the back and the mint mark round the edge. It's in the middle to 3rd quarter of the 4th century. So
it is in fact 300 years after the invasion. What we're looking for is signs of 1st century occupation, ideally military finds, although not the bits dropped by Phil.
So is that how military equipment gets lost?
That's exactly how it gets lost. Yeah, it's just spun round on the pin and slipped off.
It's a really cold day, but this exercise has got Phil thinking, and not just about where the wind's blowing.
I mean, the other thing that I've been aware of since I've been digging here, and something you just never see on a site nowadays, is all the hobnail marks. And I mean, it must have been something which was always there on a Roman site. If you had Roman military building a thing, you'd have hobnails. I mean, I thought it would be a bit more, I don't know, uncomfortable to work with all this armour on. I mean, it is a bit like trying to shovel or dig in a straitjacket. Yeah. But actually, there's actually not too bad at all. Yeah, there is a bit of sort of chafe in there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I have warmed up a bit.
I'm glad you have.
Just a few hours ago, Neil said to me, don't worry about this trench, it won't take up much time or labour, we'll just use the JCB, whip up the topsoil, and almost immediately we'll come down on finds. Now look at the depth and the length of this thing. Neil, you've gone stir crazy.
It hasn't quite gone according to plan, Tony. We thought we'd go through this topsoil and that this was the natural subsoil, but Kerry's been digging into it. I mean, it feels like natural. It looks like natural, but it's got Roman pottery in it, which means this is Roman infill down at this depth. Malcolm, what do you think of the pottery?
Well, let's have a look. Now, you've got, this is Samian. This is a very eroded Samian, it's lost its surface. It's from a Dragendorf 36 dish, post 70 AD.
Post 70 AD?
Yes. This piece, this is an inverted rim cooking pot, very heavily everted, probably 3rd century.
Third century?
Yes, probably 3rd century. This is from the carinated girth of a biconical.
Not the carinated girth of a
carinated girth of a biconical.
This is probably the first time that our viewers will ever have seen a corrugated girth of a biconical.
Yes, it's.
So what you're saying...
What sort of year is that?
Between 43 and 130.
So what you're saying is that this deposit down here is 150 years later than our putative Roman fort?
Could be.
So we've got to get down another 150 years of topsoil before we get on the what we're looking for.
I think so. I think what's happened, Tony, is that all this brown stuff, which has got Roman pottery in it, I think this is actually to do with the 18th century park. What they've done is actually move large amounts of earth about to make a flat parkland landscape.
And making it all the more difficult for us. But at least now we know the Roman archaeology is buried at different depths across this site. which is why we're wasting no time opening Trench 3, because as well as locating Paul's Roman ditch in Trench 1, we want to see if it also continues in this direction. It's been a long, cold, frustrating day. We've shifted an awful lot of dirt, and I think we started to think we were never going to find anything decent. But now things are looking up, aren't they?
Now, we haven't quite turned the corner yet, but this is a brilliant find because it's one of the key things that we need to pin it down to the invasion. The coin of Claudius. Claudius, that's the fourth emperor of Rome, the doddering half-wit put in place by the soldiers on his invasion to Britain to prove his whole position, to show that he's a great emperor. Here we go, see the name really clearly there, Claudius. Great thing is the coin's not very worn. Despite the corrosion, that means it's been lost fairly early in its life.
Dan, where did the coin come from?
That coin came from about 3 inches below this marker that we've put in here, right on the top of the lowest piece of material in the ditch. So we've still got a fair way to go to get right at the bottom, but it's looking good.
So maybe that lower fill is actually going to have the Claudian pottery to go with that coin that we've been looking for all day.
So you think we could find this fort?
This is a great start, it really is.
Earlier today, the graphics people gave me this idiot's guide to what you need to find a fort. Samian pottery, corner towers, military finds, a gateway, double dishes. Join us after the break when I'm betting that we'll get decent archaeological evidence that right here we've got a Roman fort just like that. Beginning of day 2 in our search for the first Roman fort ever found in Britain. I got really excited yesterday because down here we found a ditch, and in it there was a very early Roman coin of the Emperor Claudius. Hopefully we'll get lots more goodies in there later on. But puzzlingly, we didn't find a ditch here which would line up with the ditch that archaeologist Paul Wilkinson found over there last year, which got him thinking there was a fort here in the first place. So where is that ditch? We think maybe we're not down deep enough yet, and the big quest today is to get on down. Which is going to be easier said than done. It's difficult enough to see each other, let alone the archaeology.
Right. So we're going to find a Roman fort in here today?
We're testing a theory that there was once a Roman fort here, but struggling without any guidance from geophys, whose results so far have been foggy too. At the moment, they can't explain why they're not able to detect the Roman ditches that we know exist on this site. So we're looking for any other clues that might help us. The idea that there was a fort here isn't a new one. Back in the 1800s, various antiquarians thought the Roman army had been here.
This is in 1874, and it says, although the Roman camp's known more by tradition than by remains actually existing today, it's still traceable round the garden and the stable yard.
Paul Wilkinson's theory is influenced by the fact that over the last few years he's been excavating a 3rd to 4th century Roman settlement running alongside Watling Street, and he believes it to be the Roman town of Duralevum.
We knew already that there's Roman cemeteries to the north there, and so, we're looking at a settlement pattern already.
The Duro place name is an Old English name meaning fort or camp, and it's another reason Paul thinks there may have been a fort here. On a more practical level, Stuart's been looking at the possible shape of a Roman fort on our hilltop.
Although the stand-up plain cart shape is fairly dominant, there are a number of examples here where they're completely different. We've got a trapezoid shape there, one almost looks like a cricket bat. And the Roman engineers were very practical people. If there is a fort here, they may have tailored it to suit the shape of the ridge, which points in that direction. So we may actually have something which is that kind of trapezoidal shape.
So Stuart reckons that if there is a fort here, it could be this shape. But so far, all our efforts have been focused on the western side, and now the feeling is that it's time to change our strategy. Stuart, you're looking restless.
I'm just a little bit concerned at the moment because we've got concentration on ditches on the west side.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever we've found, we've still only got ditches there. I think we need to broaden our horizons and demonstrate that we've got another side to this possible fort. I think we've got to sort of move over to the east and see what's happening over there.
The important thing is to demonstrate we have actually got an enclosure.
That's right, yeah.
I was hoping that geophys might have better luck detecting the other Roman ditch Paul excavated on the eastern side of the site, but once again their equipment just isn't seeing it.
Yeah, what we need to know is if it carries on down there to form a second site to this enclosure.
I think you should just put a trench in on the basis of your alignments.
I think
Let us continue surveying.
Yeah, I think it's what we're going to have to do. I mean, we did it over there and we've got some results. So if we do the same tactic here, put a long trench in to cover where that ditch might go, and then it'll allow your picture to build up as well and see if it fits in between the trenches, won't it?
Our picture of nothing. I thought I'd say that before you did.
To add to our problems today, our team leader Neil has to leave us to attend an important meeting. But before he goes, I want to talk to him about my empty checklist. Should I be getting worried? I've got not one tick in any of these boxes.
No, but we've got the 2 coins, which are almost like half a tick, if you like.
Why? Why are these coins so significant? Why do they say military? They're just coins.
Well, they're coins that came over with the Roman army, and they circulated for about 20 years after the Roman invasion. Where you find them, they are almost exclusively associated with the Roman army. So they're very strong evidence that there was something happening here at the right time. I think the question is, have what we found in the trenches, does that relate to what those coins originally came from?
Yeah.
So we've got to keep going. I mean, there's certainly not time to panic.
He's right, because the ditch we've discovered under the earthwork bank could be part of the fort. It's big enough and in a good position on the brow of a hill.
Beautiful edge there. We're going to get a similar beautiful edge there. This thing's going to go right down, great big V-shaped thing.
Are you convinced that it's Roman, and does it look like a defensive
absolutely.
ditch?
I mean, we got the Claudian coin out of there yesterday, in amongst masses of Roman material, so yeah, no doubt it's Roman.
Well, I think both Dan and I are hoping that the Roman ditch we've discovered here could be one of the 2 defensive ditches that you normally get around a Roman fort. The ditch Paul found would be the outer of the 2. But the mystery at the moment is that we can't find any continuation of Paul's ditch, either in Trench 1 or over here in Trench 3. Because of this, we're now reopening one of Paul's trenches to check the alignment. So why do you need Henry?
Well, that's what I want the little fella for. I mean, look, you see that pile of dirt right there?
Phil wants Henry to work out how much deeper we'll have to dig to get down to the same Roman level that Paul found, given the dumping of soil that's gone on in this area. Henry?
Yeah?
Did he call you the little fella? Shall we deck him?
Actually, there's not a lot in it.
At least we're not superannuated old hippies.
Very good point.
I think everyone's agreed that this is a pig of a site to get to grips with. Not just the landscaping, but also the changing geology makes it difficult to read. But we have to remember it is worth the trouble. Finding evidence of a Claudian fort here would be major news, because so little's known about the Roman invasion of 43 AD.
What do the historians of the Roman period actually tell us about the invasion?
Well, our main source is Dio Cassius, a Greek who wrote about 160 years after the event. That's pretty well all we've got. It's a very interesting question, because really there's only a couple of pages, and it doesn't tell us any of the information that you or I or any other archaeologist or historian would be desperate to have, which is like exact geographical information for where they landed. All he tells us, for example, is that they came in 3 waves. I mean, he doesn't even tell us the number of troops. You'll often read in history books that it was 40 or 50,000 men. Well, that's based purely on working back from legions and soldiers that we knew were around here, probably the best part of a generation later, and a side reference that suggests there were roughly the same number of legionaries and auxiliaries involved in the conquest. So that's where the figure of 40,000 has come from, not from a Roman historian.
Where does that leave Sindale?
Well, you know, it's a key route across North Kent. I mean, they're going to have to end up controlling it. Remember that the coastline's very different at that period.
Well, the coastline would have been closer then, wouldn't it? Because
right.
the sea levels were higher.
Very important for the Roman supply bases to be close to the coast, because they would move most of their bulk materials by sea. So this is a key road route and a key sea route. So Sindale must have played, or any fort along here, whether there's a fort here or whether there's a fort somewhere else, controlling this route would have been vital to the progress of the invasion as the men and materials start to be moved in. Again, just like the D-Day landings in 1944, you've got to get all that stuff in and control it.
We've just about re-excavated Paul's old trench, and we can actually see the bit of ditch he originally discovered. And now we've done this, of course, Phil announces he thinks he's finally found the continuation of it over here in Trench 1.
Whoa, what's that? Oh, our first bit of Paul.
But at least we can now check its alignment. So with Phil's trench in the distance and Paul's old trench in the middle, we can see why we haven't found it in Trench 3.
So if we line the 2 up, the ditch should come through.
It should just come here.
There, which explains why we didn't find it
Absolutely.
In that trench we
stopped a metre and a half too short.
At long last, our diggers have got smiles on their faces. Is it just because the sun's come out, or have we actually got more evidence for our thought?
I think we're starting to get some more evidence now. The ditch up here in Trench 1 is resolving itself. It's a ditch. It's carrying on down. Where Phil is down there, we've got a ditch which is slightly curving in. It was confusing because it's right on the edge of an existing landscape feature. So you've already got a drop, and they're cutting the ditch into the edge of the drop to sort of accentuate it.
If you came to this cold
Yeah.
and just saw the evidence that we've got in the ground now, would you think, looks to me like we've got a Roman fort?
I need more, I'm afraid. I need more of the circuit. We really need to get the profile of Phil's ditch to see if it's the same as the profile of Paul's ditch.
But at last we do seem to be getting somewhere. For the first time, I'm beginning to believe that there might be a Roman fort here. Oh look, the boats come right up to here even now.
That's right.
And this is only, about a mile away from our site?
It is. You always can't see this sea, can you? It's like a cloud just hanging over the edge of the water there.
Our little site is just a little black blob just there. If you actually add in the Roman coastline,
There's no doubt that the site occupied a prime position, and it's best appreciated on our 3D model.
general wetlands.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because you can see how visible it would have been approaching from the coast. It's a completely different perspective, isn't it?
There's a stream coming down this valley, and there still is a stream flowing through Faversham. There's a creek in there, and the vessels were able to get much, much closer to our site than they can at present.
So you'd have had an army marching through the countryside, and then along the coast you'd have had support coming from the Roman boats. Finding a gateway into the fort is high on my checklist, and the fact that the ditch Phil's discovered appears to be turning suggests we could have found it. Entrances to forts varied quite a bit. Some had curving ditches, others didn't, but most had an outer bank preventing attackers charging the gate. The current debate is about how we sort out what we've got.
I think we do need to extend the trench, at least 5 metres and possibly even further, to try and get that outer bank.
All that level, all that stuff down there has been so heftily landscaped that any banks, I'm sure we're not going to find them.
I know you've been ignoring the geophysics up until now. I mean, if we look at what's in the trench and what we've got in our results now, is that not what you're talking about, Corinza?
That looks absolutely perfect. Look, this is the sort of shape of the outer bit you'd have. It comes along like that, then curves out in that S shape, then starts up again after a gap. And that's exactly what you've got there, a long curving out in the S-shaped gap and starting up again. This is fantastic.
Well, Corinza sounds convinced, but the geophys still seems very foggy to me. Nevertheless, we're extending Trench 1 to find more of Phil's curving ditch. Thankfully, over in the eastern field, progress is much easier to understand.
Well, we haven't found any Roman ditches in this trench, and we haven't found very much in the way of Roman finds,
Despite
actually.
our hopes.
Well, yeah, there's
Much else.
nothing really that's definitely first century. But the thing I thought you might want to see, Phil, is these hobnails.
I wonder why you'd ask me to bring these over. Yeah.
Oh, you see, it's a high maintenance world, you see. These are always falling out.
Look at that, those little rounded heads like that, and then just where they've been bent over.
But they don't have to be military.
No, you're right. They don't have to be military. The other thing is, and we've got to be careful about this, we know that loads of Roman graves have been found in the area. Putting a pair of shoes for the journey to the underworld in a grave is a commonplace thing for Romans to do, and what you get are the iron hobnails left behind.
Tell me about it, I've dug dozens of them.
This site's been a nightmare for geophys, but they've not given up yet.
Go ahead, Chris.
John, we've just finished a block of resistance survey in the eastern field, and I think we've actually got some interesting results this time.
Oh,
That's
fantastic.
what I'm just saying to you.
At last, a glimmer of hope for geophys. It seems their latest results may have detected a huge ditch on this side of the site. One of our frustrations has been that we've only got little bits of a ditch around here, and that means that we've no idea what the size of the thing is or what shape it's in. But if we've got a piece around here, then that really is an important piece of the jigsaw defining the area. We could know whether there's a really good chance of there being a fort here or not, just from that, couldn't we?
We need to see it on the ground.
We need to see it on the ground. This has got to be a first. John nervously rushing in to see his own results.
I hope this is worth it. Well, anything's worth it, isn't it? Look what we've got here. We've surveyed this huge area and we found this high resistance anomaly that's running along here. You can see in the plot. And it's, well, I mean, what is it? It's got to be.
It's got to be. Show me where it is on the ground.
Well, all right, okay, on the ground. Well, it's approximately going around about here, Tony. Now, it's about that orientation. So, in fact, it should be just about clipping the edge of the trench if it goes through the trench. I don't know because we've not surveyed right up to the edge of the trench, and it's all becoming too much for us today, I think.
Well, I know what he means, although I think they'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out if they really have found evidence of the fort. But it's all part of the positive trend we've had going this afternoon, the feeling that we're starting to sort out the archaeology on this hill. In fact, I optimistically asked graphics to start working on a 3D model of the kind of fort gateway we might expect. And I reckon it's this that's put the kibosh on it, because now I'm told the gateway has disappeared. The devastating news is we couldn't find any more of Phil's curving ditch because it's been quarried away. And even after massively extending Trench 1, there was no trace of the other side of an entrance. As if this isn't bad enough, after extending Trench 3, we still couldn't find any continuation of Paul's Roman military ditch in this direction.
We're following the right lines of inquiry, even if we're not getting the answers.
Hello, Neil here.
Hi Neil, it's Tony. Are you still in your AGM? One thing's for sure, we're going to need our team leader back to try and sort it all out tomorrow. In our ditch, well, it goes halfway round that turn and then it just stops.
I think let's just assess what we've got. Let's have a drink.
Yeah.
Have a look at it after a drink, and we'll go at it tomorrow morning with a fresh pair of eyes.
Find us.
The mood's mixed, but maybe we can still solve the puzzle. Certainly Paul Wilkinson still believes there's a Roman fort here.
How do you know the military? How do you know the military?
This young man from English Heritage tells me.
We've got a couple of V-shaped ditches, but they're not continuous, and the discontinuities aren't gate-like. They're just stops.
Yeah. I mean, okay, we came here looking for a fort, and I mean, it's looking as though it's slipping away. That doesn't mean to say we got to give up on it.
Oh, no.
But equally, if we haven't got a fort, what the hell have we got? Yeah. And it's just as interesting to find out what the hell we have got.
Join us after the break, because I promise you that tomorrow we'll sort all this evidence out and find out one way or another exactly what's here. Day 3 and our last chance to try and get to grips with the archaeology on this ridge of higher ground, one of the most challenging sites I think we've ever tackled. We're testing the theory that there was once a Roman fort here, but as my blank checklist shows, the evidence is proving hard to find. Yesterday, I thought we'd established that we had a Roman military ditch stretching between these two trenches.
You grant then, we got a ditch coming to here, and then where the hell does it go?
I still think, I'm not convinced that the ditch in Trench 1 is Paul's ditch, just because it's cutting material that potentially is yielding later pottery. Therefore, that ditch could be 3rd century in that trench.
Yeah, but...
Definitely not the start to the day we were hoping for. Meanwhile, I'm driving across to the other side of the site, where we're looking for another of Paul's ditches that in theory joined up to encircle the hill like this. Carenza!
Hi there.
I don't see you actually leaping up and down with enthusiasm, so presumably you still haven't found the ditch.
No, this peg is on the point at which it should come through, given that those ranging poles are on the line of the ditch, and as you can see, looking in the trench, there's nothing in there at all.
The truth is that the whole site is a big puzzle without geophys being able to detect the ditches. But our strategy of digging long exploratory trenches to locate the archaeology seems to be paying off, because we've unearthed something intriguing at this end of the trench, and we're widening to get a better look.
To me, the stratigraphy says...
But the current debate is, can we make sense of this site in the time we've got left? Neil's convinced that Phil's curving ditch found yesterday is cutting through 2nd and 3rd century layers and can't be the 1st century military ditch we're looking for.
So really all we've got, going back a step now, is we're back to where Paul had it last year in his trench. I know it all sounds a bit like just chasing ditches, but I am tempted to say, let's go back between the two trenches again now, and let's see if we can find out where that ditch really goes, work from the known into the unknown. I mean, maybe it's turned.
To prove that it's a fort. Surely to goodness, you know, we
need to look at the archaeology of the site.
After 2 days, it doesn't look like we have got one. Are we going to spend the rest of the 3 days arguing about whether or not it is, or actually trying to come up with something constructive to say, well, it's not a fort, but well, this is what we think it could well be otherwise?
Look at the archaeology of the site and let it speak for it, yeah.
As we witnessed the other day with this plucky legionnaire, Roman soldiers did occasionally lose bits of kit, but we've seen nothing in the way of military finds, and the feeling now is that the ditches could belong to a Roman farm rather than a fort. Even the big impressive ditch we found under the earthwork bank could just be a property boundary, although Dan, who excavated it, needs convincing.
Well, it's still a big ditch, and it's still a deep ditch, and if it's linked with farming and landscape and field systems, for instance, I think it's just too big and it's too clean.
It still looks a bit like a military ditch, I'll grant you, but it hasn't got the context. I mean, as you say, everything else is going now, and even the pottery from it had a wide date range, didn't it? I mean, it could be Claudian, but the range means that it could be Hadrianic again. And, you know,
although Dan's big ditch might continue under the earthwork bank, it's not possible for us to get at it here in Trench 2, because we've discovered, would you believe, the remains of a 4th century Roman road, and any earlier evidence would be deep beneath it.
We've got metal surface, it's really nice. We've got a camber, it's coming much lower down here, it's rising up. We don't have many cobbles here, it may be ruck marks from transportation, and it's aligning in this direction.
Unearthing a Roman road coming off Watling Street may not be what I was hoping for, but it is in itself a significant discovery. Another bit for Paul to add to his growing picture of Duralevum, the 3rd and 4th century town he's been excavating here at Sindale. But the whole team are now convinced that there wasn't a Roman fort here, and it's time to break the news to Paul.
So I've got to say, I think we've given your ditch a good go, Paul, but I just don't think we've got the evidence that forms a continuous line to make a side of a fort.
It's a V-shaped ditch, but it doesn't have the other features. It's not continuous with, you know, gates in the breaks.
A military ditch, Tony, has to go round something.
The theories that have been coming out and the kind of analysis of the archaeology that we've got so far really seems to me to rip to shreds your whole reason for getting us here in the first place, which was to establish whether there's a fort here. How are you feeling about
that? We can't keep going for detail of actually trying to find out which ditch is which ditch and how they all tie up. We've got to look at the wider picture.
The best use of our time now, it's felt, would be to dig at the top of the hill. Excuse me being a bit sceptical, but that sounds to me like a very clever argument for saying, in desperation, we'll just sling in some random trenches for the next 8 hours.
Those ditches must have surrounded something, and we've got to find out what they surrounded. Now we're confident it's not a fort. The only way to find out is to look somewhere in the middle.
So we're going to excavate in the middle of the site to see if we can get any clue to what was going on here. Any information now about this hill will be useful. And the most promising news of the day has come from where we've been widening the trench on the far side of the site.
But we have really started to hit some major Roman levels here.
That's a bit of a big hole you got, Mars.
I'm afraid so, yes. We were hoping this morning it was going to be part of this great big ditch going across the site, but it's actually turning into, it's either a well or it's a pit or it's some kind of shaft.
So it's another ditch that isn't a ditch?
Another one, yes, exactly. Yeah. It's going straight down and we haven't hit the bottom yet.
Anything in it?
That's about the best piece of pottery I've seen off this site. Just look at the decoration, it's really delicate. All those scrolls here. Do you see the little pair of birds on either side? You see? Little bird turning back there, another one over on this side. Hang on. These are all off the same bowl. Do you see that? No, that goes on there. There's a bit missing there, and I bet you that's the one. Look, it must have been... there we are.
Oh no, we've lost a little bit in the middle.
But look, the most interesting thing about the whole thing is the way it's been riveted together. Do you see the lead rivets that have been put through. On the top bit here, there's a hole for a lead rivet that's been missing.
And what are they for?
Well, it seems incredible you could take such a flashy piece of decorated bond and put these socking great rivets through it, making it really ugly.
Yeah.
But actually, all the way, I think right up till the 20th century, you would still rivet vessels and you can make them watertight. So a valued vessel you'd look after like that, even though it looks incredibly ugly to us.
What sort of date's this?
Late 1st century, somewhere Flavian period. That's actually very good for us, but it's still not back to the invasion.
Well, that is by far the best find that we've had on this dig. Anything else?
Wait, there's a bone pin there.
Oh, yes. Sometimes you tell me something's a bone pin and it just looks like a bit of old mank to me, but that's beautiful, isn't it?
Can you imagine trying to make that without breaking it? So you did it.
And then we've got a ring there as well. I don't know what you think of that guy.
Hexagonal. Or it's octagonal, isn't it? Yeah. It's either silver or it's silvered bronze to look like silver.
The other thing that's really interesting we haven't had before so far is this.
That's fantastic, because all we've had across here are bits of what we think might be fields, those gullies and ditches, that sort of thing, building. This is part of a curved roof tile called an imbrex, laid out in a row like that with the flat roof tiles called teguli on either side. Absolutely Roman form.
So we've got roof tile, we've got a roof, we've got a building. What do you think we've got, guys? This looking like a quite wealthy farmhouse at the end of the 2nd century?
I think that's a real possibility. With that kind of thing, that's a curved roof tile. You'd have a whole row of those up the middle of the roof and the flat tiles underneath on either side. Absolutely a Roman type. I think you've got another piece there with a fingerprint in it.
We've got lots of it coming up.
Right, then that tells me that there's probably a structure in the vicinity, a Roman building, and that's the first evidence we've had for that.
What's so reassuring to me is that we've had these little scatters of Roman evidence up till now, but we've never really had a focus anywhere where actually real tangible things might have been going on.
That's right.
So whatever this is, the new challenge is to try and make sense of it in the time we've got left. But it seems we're talking Roman farm rather than fort, and that apparently is why the geophysics didn't work.
OK, let me try and explain. If we look at the magnetics, if you've got a ditch, and that's part of a fort, inside the fort, you'll have lots of activity, burning, rubbish pits and so on. When the fort goes out of use, the material, the burnt material, goes into the ditch fill. When we walk over with the magnetics, we get a strong signal. If that ditch is actually just a field boundary, there's no fort, then you don't have the burning, you don't have the rubbish. So the fill that goes into the ditch, it's sterile. When we walk over, no signal. That's the magnetics. The resistance, look at the same ditch. Normally the fill's waterlogged, so when we go over, the currents pass through easily, we get a low signal. If that ditch is on a slope, then the water drains away down the slope. So when we walk over, no signal.
So that's 2 reasons. Any more?
How long you got?
Geophys can take some consolation from the fact that our evaluation trenches have now established that there wasn't any Roman archaeology to be detected on top of the hill. But there is one last chance for Geophys. Given that we're now finding evidence of Roman settlement in this field, they've nervously suggested that we check out the one large anomaly they detected close by.
So what's this trench in aid of then, John?
Look, that's what Chris got yesterday. This huge anomaly running through there. High resistance.
So where's our trench?
Trench is going right across there.
Fortunately, as we haven't got a lot of time, this mystery doesn't take long to resolve.
So, a Roman villa, eh?
Where did that come from?
Well, I thought that this, somebody suggested that maybe this was going to be the wing of a Roman villa.
Who? You've answered the question.
It's gravel.
Yeah.
But it's where we said it was going to be, Phil, so that's all that matters.
Would you believe it? It's that parkland landscape again.
And this is probably the worst geophysical site we've been on, and we want to go home.
Don't rush away, you could sell the aggregate rights.
If only back in the 18th century they'd known that creating a park here would cause so many problems. But later landscaping isn't the reason we've had to dig deeply here. This, we've now established, is a Roman well stuffed with clues about daily life here in the 1st to 4th century. Miles, this is my favourite bit of the site. You've got more finds.
Yes. It's a 3rd century coin. See that little radiate crown on the head?
Yeah.
Late 3rd century.
Anything else?
Yeah, these are just coming up in and around the area of the shaft.
Right, bit of metal wear. That's very heavy, isn't it?
Whatever was that?
Well, I think it might be a weight off a steel yard. You know those olden day balancers where you'd have a shaft with weights hanging off it on a hook? So you just slide along. It's so heavy that must be its function. It's certainly got a suspension hole.
And this?
Right. Red wear. Do you see the finger marks there for the decoration around the frill? There's a place over in Hertfordshire called Much Haddam, which produced quite a distinctive sort of red pottery, some of which had faces on the front, dating to the 4th century, some a little bit earlier. But again, you know, you've got a complete mishmash, haven't you, of dates all the way through the period?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly 3rd and 4th century, but there's little sort of bits of 1st.
Have you got different levels in it, or is it just all mixed up?
The actual shaft is just one homogeneous fill going right the way down.
So somebody's gone around bulldozing all the rubbish off the surface here, haven't they? At one point, dumping it in, yeah.
So in the end, although Victor enjoyed his chance to draw the Roman invasion of 43 AD, we didn't find any evidence of military activity at Sindale. The evidence we unearthed points more to a picture like this, of a 2nd to 4th century Romano-British farming settlement that was most likely reusing ditches that had been open at the time of the invasion and part of an Iron Age landscape. Or at least that's the latest theory for consideration.
I think that's going a bit beyond the evidence, really, Guy, you know. I mean, in the end, we've got a series of ditches, haven't we?
None of which have the same fill as each other. None of which
Put any bunch of archaeologists together and they'll end up arguing theories. But there's one thing that we're all agreed on, that we've scotched the 150-year-old idea that there was once a Roman fort on this hill. Which means, of course, that the first Roman fort ever built in Britain is still out there somewhere, just waiting to be found. Back in the days of Queen Victoria, an amateur archaeologist made an intriguing discovery underneath these Somerset fields. 2 Roman mosaics. Have a look at this drawing. See the detail in that rose pattern there? Classic evidence of a Roman villa. But that's not all. Experts think there could be even better mosaics still down there, although there's a very good reason why they haven't tried to look. For the last 100 years, this whole area has been an army firing range. So for 3 days, the guns are going to fall silent, allowing us to finish a job that started 150 years ago. This week we're in Somerset and it's Time Team to the rescue. 150 years ago, archaeologists stumbled across 2 mosaics in fields near High Ham, which they assumed were the remains of a Roman villa. But a lot's happened since then, and when these fields aren't being used for ploughing, they're now the fallout zone for an army firing range. So the Ministry of Defence have called us in to see if the mosaics have survived. Mind you, someone might have to put a gun to Mick Aston's head to get him fired up about Roman archaeology. Mick, these aren't bad, are they?
They're not bad, but they're not as good as they could be.
When I said not bad, that was supposed to be English understatement. They're really very good, aren't they?
No, but they're not like the others that have turned up in the middle of Somerset in recent years. I think these are an indication that there's something far more spectacular on this site, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Martin, you're the archaeologist for the MOD. You're the landowner, as it were. Do we know that these are still down there?
No. We know that these were found in the 19th century near Sam's Cross, which is where we are. But because some other things were found in this field after it was ploughed a few years ago, we did some rather nice geophysical survey and got these really rather nice and strong results here, which look a little bit like the signature you get for a Roman building, a villa. So, yes, there's something here. Yes, it might be Roman. That might be where these are.
So it's pretty promising, isn't it?
It is, but we need a bit more clarity than this. So, you know, we need to do some more geophysics on here, see if we can pick out walls a bit more clearly, and then put some trenches in, see what condition it's in, and indeed whether these things are still there in the ground.
But by the end of today, we should know if they're still there.
You can look forward to that, can't you?
Although our primary mission is to rescue the mosaics, we'll also explore the rest of the villa.
Well, all villa really means in Latin is house.
Helping us will be Roman expert Neil Holbrook. What he doesn't know about villas isn't worth knowing.
It actually encompasses an awful lot of different things, ranging from very humble houses up to almost quite palatial, lavish structures.
Which is just as well, because larger villas can be a daunting challenge to unravel, with a jumble of rooms, bathhouses and underfloor heating systems. And the Victorian plan and the MOD survey hint at exactly that. So despite the cold weather, we're keen to get stuck in straight away. But fussy old geophys need to do their own radar survey first.
Yeah, but it takes you 2,000 years to do the survey, doesn't it?
And that hasn't gone down well with one archaeologist straining to be let off the leash.
Why don't we just dig a hole?
Any idea who?
How much more you got to do?
Well, if you stop talking to me, I'll be done in about 5 minutes.
Oh, come on, it's hardly rocket science pushing that thing up and down a grass field, is
I
it?
make it look easy. See, now look, you're holding up the other piece.
Another one. I'll put another probe on the end, right? Hey?
Better.
Oh.
No, he really doesn't get technology, does he? Fortunately, the geophys is worth the wait.
What we've done is we've resurveyed a small area, and I mean the results are just so clearly. It just has to be villa building. All the wall lines, corridors, rooms, a whole mass of responses.
How deep down do you reckon this stuff is?
I think it's pretty shallow, probably not more than, half a metre.
The geophys hints at dozens of rooms, any of which could hold the mosaics. But one spot in the corner looks particularly promising. So in goes trench one. And oh look, someone's happy. Bless. And almost immediately, Phil and Neil find something rather special.
Oh, now then, what's think of that?
Oh, well, even you know what that is,
Yeah,
Phil.
I do. That's part of a mosaic floor.
That was quick. Tiny bits of stone like these are called tesserae, the building blocks of a mosaic. Let's hope that's a good omen of things to come.
Oh!
Oh! Well, it's not bad, is it, for the first the first bit of the first trench? We've got a tesserae and we've got a coin. Do you know, there's only 12 coins recorded from this site so far from the antiquarians, so lucky 13.
So a piece of tessera, a Roman coin, and also a lot of demolition rubble. All good signs of a villa knocking around somewhere. Phil, how's your trench coming along?
Really well, Tony.
Is this all stuff that was excavated in 1861?
That is the really good news. All this material looks so structured. In other words, we think it's undisturbed. We don't think it's ever been dug before. And the really nice thing is it's got these really big stones in. The plough will have bounced over that. If there are floors underneath here, they should be really well preserved.
Any finds?
Absolutely. We've got our first coins, 3rd and 4th century coins. We really are on the money.
Fantastic. Well, that's the good news. The bad news is that the weather's getting worse and the forecast is absolutely terrible. But then it would be. This is time to. Welcome back to mid-Somerset, where we're looking for 2 lost Roman mosaics which were originally found here in the mid-1800s, and of course we're looking for the Roman villa that would have been associated with them. And look at this glorious geophys. We've got walls, corridors, possibly rooms here. Looks like a Roman villa, doesn't it? And if you look in this trench. You can see plenty of what is apparently Roman stuff. There's Roman coins to go with it, but none of what we've got here would appear to have the mosaics underneath it because it's all been undisturbed. So Mick, when are we going to put in our second trench to find the mosaics?
Whoa, slow down a bit, slow down. There's a lot of work to be done here. And I think, if you don't mind me saying, we shouldn't be pursuing where the 19th century walls and mosaics were. They're an indication of what there is in this field, but the geophysics shows us there's a big site here which we need to look at. We shouldn't really be pursuing what they found earlier. We should start again with our new information.
Looking for?
Well, looking for walls, dating material, pottery, stuff like that.
Rather than a 26-foot Roman mosaic?
Yeah, we almost certainly will find more mosaics. I'm sure they are not the only two on the site, but we need some context and data material to go with it.
You could bear to be here for 3 days without finding those mosaics at all, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. If we found 5th century pottery, that would be fantastic.
And more and better mosaics?
And more of the 5th century pottery.
And more and better mosaics. Actually, as Mick says, we're not just chasing mosaics. We want to build up a complete picture of this house. What did it look like? When was it built? And did it end along with the Roman occupation of Britain in the 5th century? Well, the good news is that Phil's found our first wall. The bad news...
That is not a classic wall of a Roman villa, is it?
It ain't pretty.
It's not made out of well-dressed masonry. It's actually this fairly crude herringbone.
Yeah, but you've got to think about all the other walls and what might be around it, because look, I've been tidying up down here.
Yeah.
And it looks for all the world as though I've actually got another wall there. With the eye of faith, there's an edge coming along like that.
Yeah.
Now, granted, that edge is at right angles to that wall, with the gravelly stuff underneath it, so the gravelly stuff is earlier, and the gravelly stuff is sitting on the top of this wall, so I think that wall is later than, if this is a wall, than this wall.
I know you think I go on about this all the time.
Yeah, you do.
But why can't we be looking at a whole series of late or post-Roman, rather shoddily built timber, patchwork stuff, you know, for late in the life of the site?
Phil's discovery has got us scratching our heads. Do we have an early villa with a later or even post-Roman one on top? The answer, as always, is in the dirt and the little details.
Look at that.
Wow, it's a really nice brooch.
Can you date it?
Yeah, it's 1st or 2nd century. It's quite an early brooch. It's what's known as a dolphin brooch.
Because of the shape of it?
Yeah.
Some of the finds are helping us to date the buildings, like this 2nd century brooch from the time of the Emperor Hadrian. But others aren't quite so straightforward.
Oh, it's a classic Roman type knife.
Is it?
Yeah, quite a late one, because you've got a little rise just there above the tang.
But isn't it a bit unusual for the tang to be doing that, rather than widening out on the other plate?
Which brings to mind another interpretation.
Okay.
It's one half of a pair of shears. Yeah, you're right, Alan.
So it's not a late classic Roman knife?
Well, that line is just like a late Roman classic knife. I'm going to dig my heels in on that
right.
one. But I reserve the right to change my mind.
The only way to narrow down the date of our villa, or should it be villas, is to investigate a wider area. John thinks he's identified another set of rooms, which might also be where the Victorians dug.
My thoughts were if we put the trench that went over that boundary ditch and across this range of rooms here and this corridor, because we know we've got that early plan.
Yeah.
And it fits in somewhere along this line. We don't know exactly where.
So we might pick up the earlier excavation as well on this one, you think?
That's a chance.
Yeah.
And why I like it is we've got this very clearly defined corridor with these white lines which are the walls. But it kind of stops here, almost as if the corridor is leading into a big room here. And just imagine a larger room here would have this fantastic southward view, wouldn't it, over the hills?
Straight over the valley down in that direction, yeah.
So our second trench goes in just a few metres away from our first to see if we've got a high status room in the middle of the villa with one of the mosaics in it. And bang on target, guess what we find? Tracy, there are excited whispers from the other trench that you found a little bit of mosaic.
We have, Tony, yeah. I mean, you can see we've got a little bit in here and then a bit beyond where Rakshar's working.
A little bit of a mosaic. Come on, Tony. It's carrying on underneath here. So I think we're going to have to extend the trench back this way.
There's a gap in the middle there. Do you think you've accidentally hit it?
No, we didn't hit it. It's most probably plough damage. If you actually look at the section, we're not that far from the top at all.
So John's looking pretty pleased with his geophysics. But it turns out that the mosaic isn't quite where he thought it should be. I don't understand. I thought geophys was saying that this area here was outside the building.
That's right.
Well, you wouldn't have a mosaic outside a building, would you?
Nope.
So they're wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Could be a patio.
Back to the drawing board. Still, it is a mosaic, but is it one of the ones we're looking for? This morning, Mick promised me that by the end of the day we'd have found the two long-lost Roman mosaics. Well, the threatened rain's coming in, it's time to knock off, and we still haven't found them. Instead, we found something much better, our own previously undiscovered mosaic. It seems to be part of a corridor which goes in that direction and a long way in that direction into some rooms. And what's in the rooms? We'll find out tomorrow. Welcome to sunny Somerset, where we're looking for two lost Roman mosaics. And the exciting news last night was that we've discovered a third previously undiscovered one. At least that's what some of the archaeologists are saying. Mick, yesterday evening you were adamant that this mosaic was one that hadn't been seen since Roman times, and it wasn't one of the ones that were rediscovered in the 19th century.
Yeah.
But this is one of the two that were found by the antiquarian.
Yeah.
And this one is blue and white. That one is blue and white. That one has got a lot of long blue lines in it. This one has got a lot of long blue lines in it. This one has got rectangles. That one has got rectangles.
Yeah.
Do I need to say any more?
Yeah, but the thing is, the blue and white is the local geology. Right, the lias occurs as blue lias or white lias. So they're getting this locally, and my guess is that all the corridors in the villa are filled up with this stuff because they can do this very quickly and easily.
Maybe, but that doesn't answer the question why that one isn't this one.
Well, it's certain, Tony, because overlying the mosaic, there's this demolition material, the smashing up of the roof, the actual taking apart of the villa. This stuff has never been disturbed before.
Yeah, that's what intrigues me. I thought you would be really excited by the mosaic, but it's all the rubbish, all the detritus on top of it that's really exercising your imaginations. Why?
It's the story of the end of the villa. It's the story after the mosaic floor was laid down. I mean, look, see that burning there? It's like someone's setting a bonfire into their expensive mosaic, but, 50, 100 years later, they don't bother anymore.
Stop worrying about the end of the villa, chaps. We haven't even worked out how it started yet. Or what happened in between, come to think of it. It's time to step up a gear. Our first task for day 2 is to find where the corridor mosaic leads to. Because at the end of it could be a room with the posh mosaics we've been asked to track down.
5.18 metres on one axis.
8, yep.
So landscape investigator Stuart Ainsworth is trying to align our corridor with the Victorian plans.
So if you could drop that against the geophysics in the background.
A highly technical approach known as guesswork.
Just see if that fits along in between. I mean, that shows that range would actually fit in the gap that we haven't dug in, right between the two trenches.
Ironically.
Over in our other trench, Phil's testing his theory that we've actually got two walls from two villas.
This wall we're saying is later than everything on this side. If we could confirm that it's later than everything on that side as well, that would be very useful.
But we haven't really found any rooms yet, and the bad weather is starting to close in this morning. Even Phil's starting to get on a bit of a downer.
Neil, what we've been digging here, I mean, we are talking about this being a villa, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, now, according to the checklist that I've got on villas, I mean, I expect to find nice painted wall plaster, nice floors, maybe underfloor central heating and all the rest of it. We haven't got any of those sorts of things on this site. Does this mean that this is not a villa?
Oh, it's definitely a villa, Phil, because, you know, it's got mosaic floors, it's got stone walls. But yeah, it hasn't got painted plaster so far. I mean, there's no evidence of hypercourse or bath houses at all, is there? So I guess this is a kind of middle-range villa, not at the really top end, the really opulent, but not in the cowshed either.
Well, let's put that into modern day speak. I mean, the people who are going to be living here, are they going to be like management, middle management, senior management, chief executive? It ain't going to be Joe who ploughs the fields, is it?
No, it ain't going to be Joe. You know, the top 2% of the country, Phil. Think about that. Oh, it's a senior manager.
So you would be living in a building like this, I'd be living in a roundhouse.
That is exactly how it would be.
So while our villa owners weren't short of a bob or two, it's possible they didn't have quite enough money for top-of-the-range mod cons like underfloor heating. Even the local stone used in the mosaic seems a bit cut price. I love these things. What are they?
They're actually spoon handles. They're nicely...
But if the villa was built on the cheap, some of the possessions inside were at least meant to look expensive.
They've got this lovely metal coating on them, so originally they'd have looked like they were silver. They're also really nicely decorated, and they've got a sharp point at one end, so you could break open an egg with them.
What's your favourite find?
Well, as I'm a coin specialist, I always like to look at the coins first, and there's a really nice 4th century Roman nummus, and it depicts Romulus and Remus being fed by the she-wolf.
And they were the twins who founded Rome?
Yep, the founders of Rome. And the other really interesting thing about this find is that it shows where it was made. Just underneath Romulus and Remus, there's the mint mark, and in this instance, it's one from Siscia, which is in modern Croatia.
What do you think of this collection of finds? Is it what you'd have expected us to get?
Yeah, for me, this is a typical villa assemblage. You've got this hint of early Roman activity, but most of the finds come from the 3rd and 4th century.
Why then?
Well, in the 4th century, there was an explosion in the growth of villas in Britain, so this is exactly what we'd expect.
For much of the Roman Empire, the 4th century was a time of turmoil, with rampaging barbarians and rival emperors. And across the Channel, Britain was doing pretty well. Upper middle class families on the make were earning money and spending it on villas and mosaics. Mid-afternoon, and Stuart's finished cross-referencing the geophys and the Victorian plans, and now reckons the mosaics should be right between our two trenches at the western end of the corridor. Well, let's hope he's right. The cold wind is now really starting to bite, and everybody's crossing their fingers that the mosaics will turn up soon.
Woohoo! That's what you're looking for, I think you'll find.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Right on the money.
Oh!
This is great news, another mosaic. But is this one of the two we're looking for?
You've got the dog tooth pattern, which you've got there. Then the band of interlacing, sort of knotwork with the red tesserae picking out the strand. So the only place we can be, the big star It's just about there.
Although it's still very muddy, this must be one of the mosaics we've been asked to look for.
This is a smaller room here with this mosaic in. The division between the rooms should be about here in this trench.
And like buses, you wait for ages in the cold for one mosaic.
Whoa!
And two come along at once.
Let's have a look. Yeah, what have you got down there?
Well, you've got this kind of brickwork pattern, then a grey band coming along and turning a corner.
Well, that looks pretty much like this stuff here. You see this? That's where you were in the other one down there.
Right.
And you should be just coming into that area there.
Yeah.
You're coming across at that angle.
Well, look, here it is, Stuart. Look, you've got one grey block here, and then we've got white, and then another band of grey where Tracy is.
The whole thing looks to be intact, as if it's not been eaten to at all.
So at last we've got our two mosaics sitting next to each other. But how much has actually survived? Another hour's digging brings some worrying news.
There's a bit missing, all this bit here.
Yeah, we seem to have lost its ends since, 150 years ago. It looks remarkably neat, doesn't it, that line?
Just this cut here, it does look a bit suspicious.
Almost as if a Monkton actually took it up and took it home, put it on his mantelpiece.
It's still a beautiful thing, though. Imagine all the hundreds of posh sandaled feet that must have walked over that.
Yeah, and not just the posh guys, because there's a whole army of slaves and servants that were needed to keep a house of this style and status running, bringing all those essential functions that we kind of take for granted today.
Would the slaves have been English people, or would they have been shipped here from abroad?
Oh, I think almost certainly locals, really, because people were born into slavery. It's hereditary. It's not their choice. There's still always that, essentially, you are the slave and I am the master. And in the end, you had the choice of almost life and death over them, and that was quite a brutalising relationship, really.
In order to demonstrate just how vital a part Roman slaves would have played in the economy around here, we're going to do an experiment. We are creating our own slave who for 24 hours will do what we tell him to do. We've got a volunteer. Can you come out, volunteer? Matt, thank you for saying you'll do this.
Welcome.
Here are your clothes. You're smiling now, but actually, we're going to take this very seriously. In fact, we're going to be quite tough slave masters, as a lot of them were. You are not allowed to speak to any of us unless we speak to you, OK?
And that goes for everyone?
Everyone. Anybody asks you to do anything, you just do it. All right?
OK.
Off you go. He's still laughing, bless him. Not for much longer. Very good indeed. Not quite sure about the boots and the socks, but well, that's it really.
I've got a couple of questions actually before we start.
What did I say? What did I say? You don't speak unless you're spoken to.
Permission to you to speak to me, sir?
No! Permission denied. Off you go. Couldn't quite get into this.
It's likely villa slaves would have had specific functions, some to work in the house, some out in the cold on the farm. But we've only got one, so he's going to have to do everything. His first task is to wash the mud off our motorised chariot before serving tea
I've just had lunch, thank you.
to a bunch of cold and soggy archaeologists.
They're wet.
Oh, sorry, sir.
Oi, slave, stop eating the cake. I'm sure he's not meant to do that. Back outside, geophys have now surveyed a huge area. We've got lots of unusual features and maybe a second range of buildings to the southwest.
Well, the thing that strikes me about the geophysics, Mick, is that there's a very clearly defined rectangular block here.
Right.
And then it seems to reduce slightly in thickness before carrying on. which suggests to me that there's more than one phase. This could be an add-on.
So you think we might have an earlier building there and then add stuff onto it?
Yes.
So we'd not only get the condition, we get some chronology into it as well.
Right.
Also, the question is, what's the status of this range? Is this a villa which is like L-shaped with both wings of equal status?
Yeah.
Or is this the working range?
Yeah.
So I think if we do a trench, we should try and look inside one of these rooms to try and get evidence of chronology, status and function.
Yeah.
So trench 3 goes in to see if we've got an L-shaped villa with a western range. All villas would have had a farm, and as punishment for cake stealing, Matt's going to be banished to work on ours. But as we haven't actually got a farm, we've lent him to the next door villa owners. Aren't we generous? All right, get to work. There's always someone better off than a slave, isn't there, Matt? It's now nearly the end of the day, and our work on the corridor mosaic is almost done. How's this coming along?
I think we're pretty well finished with this trench now. I think we've got a little bit of cleaning up to do and some drawing, and then I think we backfill it.
Close it up again, our lovely mosaic.
Yeah, well, obviously that's got to be protected with some terram and sand and stuff like that, but I think we've learnt all we can from it.
Have we learned that much?
Yeah, well, what we have shown is it's actually pretty trashed in this trench, really.
Yeah.
You know, the mosaic is, pretty bitty.
This wall here, you're looking at section there, they've pinched every useful bit of stone out of it. I think we understand the story here, which is actually basically one of robbing and ploughing and collapse.
It's a shame so much of our corridor mosaic's missing, but we've found enough to say that it ran along the front of the northern range.
Even though the weather has been pretty dreadful and freezing cold, it's been a good day for us with little bits of mosaic popping up all over the place. But as the day's gone on, our archaeologists have become more and more interested in something which I'd hardly even noticed on the 1861 drawing. It's this circle here, and it says that it well filled up with rubbish, and that well would be over there somewhere, and apparently it's Roman rubbish that's in it, and we all know what the Romans put in the bottom of their wells, sacred objects, so who knows what we might find tomorrow. Thirsty work, eh, Phil?
Oh, too right.
Slave?
Oh, got some for me.
And the sun's coming out again.
I know.
What a lovely day.
Salute.
Salute. 10 a.m. day 3, and something's not quite right. The diggers have fallen silent, and the only sign of movement is Matt, our slave, carrying a portable heater. With a bitter wind chill factor of almost -10, we've called everything to a halt.
Right, thanks Paul for coming down. As you know,
It's
it is
10:15.
freezing out there.
We've lost nearly 2 hours digging. Everyone's stopped.
I mean, as far as I can see of it, that L-shaped trench here...
Well, that's the only one, isn't
yeah,
it?
But it's
That's,
although you're saying that's the only one, that's where the big problems come in, because it is too cold to go out there. We can't do it.
Get a shelter, I will, if not some form of windbreak for you, and at least try and stop the cold getting to you.
Until we get a windbreak, we ain't digging out there.
Okay, that's fair enough.
For even Phil to down tools for the first time in 18 years, things must be bad. It's turning out to be one of the toughest digs we've ever had. To save our strength, we've decided not to open any more trenches, which is just as well because there's a heck of a lot to resolve today. We need to clean up our mosaics, nail down whether we've got 2 building phases in Trench 1, and see if we've got a western range. We've also got to put up tents to protect the delicate archaeology from the elements, and bring in windbreaks for the not-so-fragile digging team. That's one hell of a parasol.
Phil, you managed to do some digging at last.
It's quite cosy in here, Tony.
Oh, it's not so bad when the wind drops, is it?
No, but it's very, very nice to be in the shade of that van.
So what have we got?
Well, what we've managed to find now is this main wall here, which is the end wall of this main villa complex that's coming down here. And you can see that it's actually made of these pitch stones, which is exactly the same construction that we had the slightly later wall in Trench 1.
So, have you any idea at all what period this wall could be?
Only very loosely. We know that the earliest wall that we've got up there was probably 2nd century, and we know the mosaics are the 4th century. So I guess this wall is going to be somewhere in between, or maybe 4th century itself.
And what's all this stuff on either side of it?
Well, we can see one of the things we've got is a lot of burning, and we wonder whether or not these walls here are actually just foundation walls for timber frame building. You can build perfectly good timber frame villas that will stand up, perfectly good roofs. This is probably, a lot of this is going to be probably roofing slates. It's going to be a really substantial building.
So we've definitely got an L-shaped villa with a western range, which looks like it was built in the 3rd or 4th century. That's the period we think our mosaics date from. And we're now busy scraping and sponging away centuries of mud to reveal the patterns underneath. The design would have been bright, but basic.
On the first day, I was saying to Tony that I thought these mosaics found in the 19th century were a bit ordinary, really.
I can see what you're driving at. Yes, at first glance, they are sort of, you know, just blue and white.
Yeah.
But these look like mosaics of very good, competent execution and style.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating is that this range is producing a large number of mosaics, and I think it says something about the wealth here. These are people who are almost certainly Romanised Britons living right on the edge of empire.
So they're not Romans at all, really?
No, but they are consciously commissioning and displaying for all that come that they are buying into this part of the Roman dream.
Someone else who's living the Roman dream is our silent slave for 24 hours, Matthias Williamus. He's been up early boiling water and cleaning the muddy toilet floor. And if that wasn't bad enough, by mid-morning he's quite frankly being exploited by the more unscrupulous members of the team.
Yeah, back. Yeah, and back again.
That's no good, Jimmy. He's got magnetic boots on.
Oh.
Get those boots off.
But what happened to the slaves and all the other people living in the villa after Rome abandoned Britain in the 5th century?
Nice big chunky rim shirts there, aren't they?
Yeah, but what's really...
It seems they at least tried to keep on living here.
We've got 3 sherds here, including a conjoining pair, of this black burnish ware that's been identified as the very latest product.
Yeah, it dates to the 5th century, doesn't it?
That's right. This is the stuff that's still being produced in the opening decades after 400 AD. And you can see it's got decoration just lightly burnished in one direction, and it's from quite a squat jar with a big inverted rim. But the lovely thing is that we can now say that we recognise Roman-type pottery that's still continuing into the opening decades of the 5th century.
Yeah, well, I've got a coin here which dates from right at the end of the 4th century. It was probably in circulation into the 5th.
Yeah.
It's a nummus and it's of the Emperor Theodosius.
Oh, yes.
So it's really nice to get one of the latest coins that
Yeah.
were supplied to Britain here on this site.
That's good, isn't it? Coin, pot, and we're going beyond the end of Roman Britain here into the opening years of the 5th century.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
The coin and the 5th century pottery suggest that life carried on in our villa after the Roman Empire is supposed to have collapsed. Traditionally, that's the year 410, when the Goths sacked Rome. The news of that event would have reverberated around the empire. Goths sacked Rome, read all about it. Even as far away as our villa in chilly Somerset.
So what do you think the effect would have been on all the people who lived in the villas in Somerset and Gloucester when they realised that the Romans weren't coming back?
I think at one level it would have been quite a psychological blow. But I think in this part of the world they would still view themselves as part of the Latin world, the Roman world. They may even have thought this is only a temporary break and soon there will be a new set of Roman administrators.
So you'd have had all these people desperately trying to keep up Roman appearances, even though the very Roman stuff that supported them was gradually dribbling away.
Yeah, all those skills that went with it that you could support, mosaicists and things like that. People are going to be looking more and more at subsistence, really, surviving and getting through, but still with this echo of a Roman heritage, probably lasting for another 100, 150 years.
It's wonderful to think that people in our villa might have been clinging on to the Roman way of life against the odds. Just like Matt, our experimental slave, whose final official task is to prepare the dining room for lunch.
Serviette, madam.
Thank you.
Sir.
Whilst you're at it, can you comb my hair? It's been in a bit of a state.
And the boots will want cleaning. See to it.
Very good, sir.
Oh.
Go on, get on with it. I've got work to do. A bit more like it.
Right, boy. I want you to sort this mop out, please. You start from the bottom up. I've got no hair left.
Lunch and a good boot wash have given Phil the time to mull things over.
I think this part of this trench is actually crucially important to the whole story here, because we've actually got two walls of two different dates. We've got that wall down there, which is the earliest wall.
This is the one with the square corner.
Crucially, we've got some pottery from that, and it's 2nd century.
Oh, crikey, that's well early on then.
Absolutely.
Right.
But what I think I can say is that maybe this wall may well go with this cobbled surface, because this yard surface goes underneath this wall there. But what, like I say, what is crucial is that it does stretch the life of the villa by so much.
And actually that's not uncommon around here, that you start with a smaller villa building, simpler, and then bolt other stuff onto it to make a big complex.
Phil's confirmed that we've got a 2nd century house which was remodelled and expanded into an L-shaped villa in the 4th century. All along, we've assumed that the northern building came first and that the early wall in Trench 1 belonged to it. But then Phil makes a surprising discovery in the western range.
Cool, what you got there, Alan?
Well, it's face of a wall.
That's good.
Yeah.
Those facing stones are flat again. And that's exactly the same building technique that we had up there in the first trench that we built. I'm convinced that if you've got these flat slabs, it's the early wall, and if it's pitched, it's the later one.
The two 2nd century walls appear to be part of the same building. And it makes us realise that we've been looking at the villa the wrong way round. We now know it began life as a simple stone building, not in the north, but in the west, sometime in the 2nd century. Then, as the owners' social fortunes improved, they added a second range, which was half-timbered, to the north in the 3rd or 4th centuries. And that was the one which included the mosaics. But the renovation seems to have been done on the cheap. The walls were of rough pitched stone. Even the mosaics were made from local material. And it's possible that the plain old wing became the servants' quarters. Talking of servants, it's time to give our slave his freedom.
Matt, you've still got your slave's costume on.
Yeah.
The 24 hours is over.
I'm free?
Yeah.
Oof, great.
You're right.
Oh, that's better.
What was it like?
Well, to be honest, the physical work wasn't too bad. It was no worse than the digging I do every time we do a time team.
So what did get under your skin?
I think what I noticed the most was a kind of loneliness. You couldn't have a chat at lunchtime. You couldn't even say hello to people when they walked past you. So I was silent all the time, and you kind of felt very isolated after a while.
How did people treat you?
I was obviously briefed on how to be a slave, but that meant everyone else had to act like slave owners towards me, and I think that was quite difficult.
I found it really easy to shout at you.
Oh, yeah, I noticed.
As the day draws to an end, the sun and the colour in the mosaics are starting to shine through. Sadly, they've deteriorated since they were last seen 150 years ago, probably from ploughing. But at least we've ensured that they'll be protected in future.
Is this one room or two rooms, or what?
Yes, it's both. It's what's called a bipartite room. Two rooms that operate as one. You've got like your entrance hall almost, with this lovely mosaic that's really sort of vibrant with its colours now that it's been sponged down. Then you can see here that we've got this semicircular footing.
Yeah.
What we might have here is like half column actually attached to the wall, rising up with a nice big decorative capital, in which case we're looking at a grand double doorway through the steps into here, or it's the pedestal base for a statue. Either way, we're looking at a very, very grand room.
What would the walls have been like?
Almost certainly richly decorated, painted wall plaster. But of course we haven't found much here because this has already been cleared out by Moncton in the 1860s.
And that's not all. Curiously, we appear to have post holes driven into the mosaic floor. This act of vandalism is perhaps more evidence that life here struggled on after the end of Roman Britain.
It's been quite an odd exercise for me because we came here trying to find some grand aristocratic villa, but what we actually discovered was the end of a grand aristocratic villa.
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've almost looked at his final gasp of life of this building. What actually happens when that economy that underpins the existence of this house starts to fail?
So you mean that when the Roman bureaucracy collapsed, there was nothing to support it?
No, that's right. Money becomes worthless. So in the end, you can't actually afford to repair your house. You haven't got a means of doing it.
What had been some great status symbol ends up just as an albatross around your neck.
Absolutely right. And so I think what also might happen is you can't pay your servants or keep your slaves anymore. They might actually sort of run off. I mean, there are some Latin authors that talk about a group called the Burgundi, which are a band of sort of runaway slaves and brigands roaming around Britain and Gaul, ransacking and just nicking things.
So actually, in rubble and burning, we're seeing the last days of Rome in Britain.
Absolutely. It's really about the end of the Roman way of life, which is funded by the Roman economy.
Over the past 3 days, we've unearthed a villa which mirrors the rise and fall of Roman Britain. A modest house which ended up with pretensions of grandeur. In its heyday, cheap blue and white Lias mosaic corridors would have led into a large summer dining room, with our 2 mosaic floors, and on a fine day, views across the valley beyond. On the dining room table, perhaps the fake silver spoons we found. All in all, dare we say it, just a little bit chav. Home to a minor aristocrat, his or her family, and of course keeping the whole thing going in the background, servants and slaves. But the good times weren't to last. It struggled on into the 5th century, but the villa, along with Roman Britain, was past its sell-by date.
It's nice to think that at the end of the Roman Empire, the local Brits were still keeping up standards with their beautiful mosaic floors and their reasonably well-appointed villas, and of course that essential of Roman life, the slaves. Mind you, By the end of the empire, those guys were already heading for the hills.